Thousands of anomalous entities have been cataloged by the SCP Foundation, each with its own object class, containment procedures, and threat assessment. This video covers the first 100 entries in the catalog. Timestamps below. Awaiting declassification is SCP-001, and it is the only file in the archive that does not describe a single anomaly. It is a hub. Behind it sit 63 separate documents, each written as the real SCP-001, each contradicting the rest. The file opens with General Notice 001-Alpha, which states that several, or no, false SCP-001 files have been created alongside the true file, or files. The wording refuses to commit to a number on either side. Every version, decoy and genuine alike, is described as protected by the Berryman-Langford mimetic kill agent, which the notice claims causes immediate cardiac arrest in any unauthorized reader. Disclosing the nature of SCP-001 to the public is listed as cause for execution. Past the warning, the file confirms continued life signs, reports that it is removing its safety interlocks, and presents a menu. The reader chooses one entry from the list. The proposals span the full history of the archive. Dr. Gears offers the prototype. Dr. Clef offers the Gate Guardian, an entity holding a line no one is meant to cross. Some frame the Foundation as the last thing standing between humanity and the end. Others frame the Foundation as the mistake. None of them is official. The Foundation's own paperwork states that the decoys and the truth were built to be indistinguishable, and the archive has never resolved which is which. The living room is SCP-002, a tumorous mass of flesh with a volume of about 60 cubic meters and an iron valve hatch set into one side. The interior is a modest low-rent apartment. One wall holds a window, though no opening of any kind is visible on the outside of the object. The furniture is sculpted from bone, woven hair, and other materials the human body produces, and every piece tested returns its own independent or fragmented DNA sequence. It arrived from orbit. The object struck northern Portugal and was found in a small crater, its rock shell cracked open by the impact. A farmer reported it to his village elder, and a Foundation agent stationed nearby picked up a faint radioactive anomaly coming off it. The recovery squad under General Mulhausen tested it using 3 men recruited from the village. All 3 walked in and did not come out. Mulhausen responded by ordering the termination of every witness, roughly a third of the village. During transport preparation, 4 of his own security personnel were drawn inside and vanished as well, after which the object grew several new furnishings and began to resemble the interior of an apartment. 7 personnel have disappeared into it to date. In that time, it has furnished itself with 2 lamps, a throw rug, a television, a radio, a beanbag chair, 3 books in an unknown language, 4 children's toys, and a small potted plant. Lab animals produce no reaction. Higher primates produce no reaction. Cadavers produce nothing at all. Whatever converts matter into furniture only works on living humans. Standing orders reflect that. Nobody approaches within 20 meters alone, and teams stay in physical contact because perception dulls near the object.
Like this video and subscribe to Maker.
Biological motherboard is 003, and it is 2 objects rather than 1. 003-1 is a flat board of chitin, hair, and nails, laid out in the configuration of a computer motherboard built from a biology that matches nothing on record. Testing places it thousands of years before the earliest known circuit boards. It rests on SCP-003-2, a stone tablet carved with runes that belong to no known language and emit a pale flickering light. The tablet runs on a non-biological internal computer and an anomalous power source that has been draining since centuries before anyone found it. Foundation assessment is that the tablet was built to hold the board. Below 35 degrees Celsius, both react. The board begins growing exponentially, converting the matter around it, starting with inorganic material and moving on to non-living organic material. In its first stage, it takes the shape of a brittle star roughly 15 meters across with a 3-meter central mass, forms sensory organs, and scans the room. The second stage begins the moment it touches something alive. It templates itself off that organism and tries to talk to it, and while contact holds, its growth slows. During one procedure, it quadrupled in mass, breached containment, and reached the observation gallery where 9 researchers were standing. It wrapped them in newly grown appendages, stopped growing for 15 minutes, then rebuilt its center into a 3-meter female humanoid and attempted speech. All 9 were physically unharmed. The team lead's testimony is the reason the file reads the way it does. She reported that it intends to remake the world into a paradise, filtered through its own understanding of what a paradise is, and that it would do the same for whatever sufficiently complex mind it encountered first. The 12 rusty keys and the door is SCP-004, an old wooden barn door on an abandoned factory, and a set of 12 rusted steel keys that all fit the same lock. 3 trespassing teenagers found the keys in an iron lockbox in 1949. One of their friends opened the door and was torn into pieces that vanished on the spot. His right hand turned up 8 kilometers away, other parts as far as 32. The Foundation took the investigation, then terminated the teenagers and the sheriff. 12 D-class subjects each tried a different key. 10 were torn apart in multiple directions, their remains deposited across locations, only 3 of which have been confirmed to be on Earth. Material at 2 of those points arrived immediately. Material at the 3rd arrived years later. 2 subjects survived. Key 7 is the safe one. The subject who used it described a room impossibly large for the building attached to it, a space that cannot be measured, where the doorframe and the people standing in it are the only things that can be felt or lit. Key 12 returned subjects catatonic. Of 16 who used it, 4 survived, and 1 regained speech after long-term therapy. He described a massive green creature extending past his field of view, immediate recognition, and memories pushed into him that he could not parse. The Foundation built inside it anyway. Site-62 sits in the space behind Key 7 and holds emergency storage for mobile specimens and a full backup of the SCP database. Time runs differently in there. Staff who spend weeks inside insist it was days, and the work logs agree with them. Personnel now live on site permanently, and their families have been told they died in an industrial accident. Skeleton key is 005, an ornate key with all the characteristics of a mass-produced key from the 1920s. It opens any lock, mechanical or digital, with relative ease. Where that ability comes from has not been determined. It came to the Foundation's attention because a civilian used it to walk into a high-security facility. It is classified safe, and the file is direct about why. The object poses no immediate risk in any direct sense. The danger is entirely a matter of access. Removing it from containment requires the approval of at least 1 Level 4 staff member, and the file lists the specific misuses that have evidently come up before. It may stand in for a lost security pass under supervision. It may not be used to fix a vending machine, open a locker, or replace anyone's spare house key. Taking it off the compound carries immediate termination. The interesting part is in Appendix A. Disguising a lock works. In roughly half the cases where a volunteer could not identify a locking device as a lock, the key failed to open it. Nothing about the device itself stops the key. What stops it is concealment. On that basis, SCP-005 has been tentatively classified as sentient, and testing continues on what it can actually understand. The implication the file leaves standing is that the key does not defeat locks so much as recognize them, and it recognizes them at roughly the same rate a person does. Fountain of Youth is 006, a very small spring 60 kilometers west of Astrakhan. Foundation Command knew it was there from the 19th century and could not secure it until 1991, held off by politics rather than by any property of the object. A chemical factory now stands on the site as cover, staffed mostly by workers under Foundation or Russian control. Chemical analysis in 1902 identified the liquid as ordinary mineral water. The file describes its actual property as health. Ingested, it regenerates DNA, damaged by repeated duplication, accelerates cell division, sharply improves the repair of damaged tissue, and raises the effectiveness of the immune system to a degree the file calls frightening. In animal testing, hostile bacteria and viral agents were destroyed on contact. Reptiles and birds showed no effect. Higher primates responded exactly as humans do. The containment procedures are the part worth attention, because they are not written to protect anyone. The file states plainly that the measures exist to hide the effects from the personnel who handle it. Staff wear sealed suits and are submerged in water beforehand to check for leaks. They are briefed with material 006B or 006C. The accurate briefing, 006A, is restricted to O5 clearance. If anyone touches the spring, the commander announces Procedure 006-X I-12, which staff have been trained to understand as a toxicity alert requiring evacuation. Anyone who does make contact is confined, studied, and then terminated by incineration. SCP-006 is classified safe. Abdominal planet is 007, and it is not the man. It is what is inside him. The subject is an adult male, physically around 25, though he says 28, and 176 centimeters tall. Most of his abdomen is simply absent, muscle, skin, and organs alike, and he shows no sign of suffering for it. In the cavity sits a sphere of soil and water about 60 centimeters across that never touches his body at any point. It is a near duplicate of Earth, with a continental arrangement matching no configuration in Earth's history. It has its own weather and a negligible gravitational pull. Microscopic organisms resembling those of modern Earth live on it. 2 intelligent species have been observed. No contact has been made with either. Their technology is checked at least weekly, and currently sits at roughly 15th century level. The subject gives a name that matches no records. He does not require food or water, though he has been seen consuming both, and what becomes of it afterward is unknown. His IQ measures 128. He is amiable, treats the planet as a minor curiosity about his own body, and shows no stress about any of it. Asked where it came from, he said he woke up one day and it was there. He volunteered his social security and driver's license numbers and asked staff to check them. Neither had been issued yet. He lives in a sealed 10-meter room furnished as an apartment, gets most of what he asks for, and plays weekly chess with a staff doctor who uses the game to assess his mental state. He has never tried to leave. His one repeated request is a computer with an internet connection, and the standing recommendation is to refuse. Zombie Plague is 008, a complex prion held in samples at each of the known G2 sites. Research on it is classified at level 4 and aimed mostly at one goal, making sure nobody ever works out how to synthesize it. The traits are listed without qualifiers. 100% infectious, 100% lethal. It transmits through exposed mucous membranes and all bodily fluids. It is not airborne and not waterborne, which is the only reason the file is as short as it is. Symptoms appear within 3 hours. Fever and flu-like illness first, then severe dementia, then coma about 20 hours in. The file treats coma onset as the onset of death. What happens after that is the reason the entry exists. Tissue undergoes patchy necrosis resembling gangrene, and whatever survives resumes its original function and becomes highly resilient. Red blood cells store far more oxygen, which slows circulation while raising endurance and strength. The nervous and muscular systems keep running for hours after total organ failure. Metabolism can drop far enough for a body to persist more than 10 years without nutrition. Blood viscosity rises high enough that gunshot, puncture, and slashing wounds barely bleed. Cognition does not recover. Subjects retain standing, balancing, walking, biting, grabbing, and crawling, and move toward sights, sounds, and smells they associate with living people. Physical contact ends in an attempt to eat. Neutralizing one requires significant cranial trauma. Evidence indicates the prion did not form on Earth. A short joint effort with the USSR to locate the G2 sites and eliminate it was negotiated in 1959, following their own discovery. What became of the Russian samples after that collaboration ended is unknown. G2 sites are ordered not to prepare an evacuation procedure. Red ice is 009, a quantity of liquid that looks like distilled water carrying a distinct bright red hue. That color holds through every phase, and it is the fastest way to spot contaminated material before the anomaly shows itself. Its states run backwards. It is liquid between -100 and 0 degrees Celsius, solid above that, and vapor below -100. Atomic examination finds it identical to ordinary water, except for behavior that contradicts the standard laws of enthalpy. The site's specialist in xenospatial physics suggests it comes from a universe running on different rules. The hazard is contamination. On contact with any aqueous solution, it transfers its properties across. It has assimilated ice, steam, tea, fruit juice, seawater, and blood, taking anywhere from 3 minutes to several hours depending on temperature and composition. In a living subject, the conversion runs in stages. First, it takes up surface moisture, felt as nothing more than slight warmth. Then, frost forms as body heat pushes the material above freezing. Then the temperature runs away through the whole body. Blood loss stays minimal throughout, which is why subjects remain alive and conscious well into the process. D-class testing was discontinued. It was recovered in Alaska after a native tribe found the bodies of shipwrecked seal hunters encased in red ice. Cause of death was recorded as internal bleeding. The ambient cold slowed the conversion, which extended how long the victims stayed conscious. The retrieval site was barren rock several meters from open water. The file states that had it been any closer, an extinction level event would have followed. Reclassification to Keter has been raised and declined. O5 Command's position is that it stays Euclid as long as the power stays on and nobody goes near it. Collars of control is 010, 6 apparently identical cast iron collars with numbered metal tags, plus 1 remote control. The collars are SCP-010-2 through -7. The remote is SCP-010-1. Each collar holds intricate electronic components running on a rechargeable 100-volt battery 5 mm across. The remote is a heavy black box built like an old handheld radio transmitter with a primitive blue and white cathode ray screen, more than 100 unlabeled buttons, and a frequency tuner. Staff worked out the frequencies of all 6 collars by trial and error. Stamped into the metal is a label in Russian alongside a logo of workers building a pyramid. No Russian company or government agency uses that logo, and none matches the words. Fastened around a person's neck, the collar gives whoever holds the remote control of every movement that person makes. It can also trigger an adrenal response and switch the sympathetic nervous system on or off. The most abnormal property is its effect on body morphology. The operator can reconfigure the wearer's shape, limited only by how well they understand the remote's programming language. It was found in the basement of a man living alone in the Midwestern United States, after a local disappearance was traced back to him. Police found the collars and several bodies. One was the man. The others were missing persons. Cause of death was recorded as mass suicide, with clear signs of a struggle beforehand. Disassembly testing showed the collars depend on a handful of components that cannot be replicated. A duplicate built with the closest available substitutes does nothing until those specific parts are moved into it. A staff note closes the file by observing that the collars work better at producing unskilled labor than at anything else, and that the logo is apt. Sentient Civil War Memorial Statue is 011, a granite memorial in Woodstock, Vermont, carved from local stone into the figure of a young soldier holding a musket at his side. It stands where it has always stood. It has also, at various points, been observed raising the musket and firing at birds attempting to land on it. The movement makes a soft grinding sound and causes no damage to the stone. The musket loads granite shot and granite powder, and the report still sounds like an ordinary firearm. Neither the weapon nor the statue shows wear from the firing. Some droppings still land, and the file notes that the statue becomes distressed when heavily fouled and has on rare occasions fired at people. The timeline is the part of the file that matters. In March 1995, a resident reported the statue's eyes moving. That September, it fired for the first time. It was registered as SCP-011 in early 1996, and containment procedures began, which amounted to cleaning the statue and the ground around it once a day, after dark, with at least 2 staff present. By 1997, it was observed moving casually and looking around. In 2000, after a caretaker jokingly shouted, "Good shot," the statue answered, "Thank you," in what witnesses described as a very human voice. In 2001, it held a full conversation and stopped shooting birds entirely. In February 2002, at a caretaker's urging, it stepped down off its pedestal. Between 2003 and 2004, it reached a human level of self-awareness. In November 2004, containment procedures were dropped, and custody was transferred to its caretaker. The most recent psychological testing on file puts its IQ at 133. A bad composition is 012, a single page of handwritten musical score titled On Mount Golgotha, part of a larger set of sheet music. The page is incomplete, and it ends mid-passage. It was recovered from a northern Italian tomb that a storm had broken open. The ink was initially taken for berry juice or a natural dye. Analysis identified it as human blood, drawn from more than one person. The first Foundation personnel to reach the sheet were a salvage team, and 2 of them lost their minds on the spot, opening their own veins to continue the composition. Both died of blood loss and internal trauma. That result has held in every controlled test since. Subjects given access to the score mutilate themselves to write in their own blood, then develop psychosis and severe physical trauma. The ones who actually managed to complete a section did not survive it. Each of them killed themselves immediately afterward, and each of them said the same thing first: the piece is impossible to complete. Attempts to play the music produce nothing coherent. Each instrumental line has no relationship to any other, harmonically or otherwise, and the result is described in the file as a disagreeable cacophony. Containment is built entirely around keeping the page out of sight. It sits inside an iron-shielded box, suspended from the ceiling with at least 2.5 meters of clearance from the floor, the walls, and any opening, in a room kept permanently dark. Anyone who sees it under any light other than infrared is pulled for psychological screening and a physical. The concrete man is SCP-014, a man who appears to be about 30, with black hair, brown eyes, and a somewhat round face. Records identify him as Robert Chetford, committed to the Norwich Asylum in Connecticut in 1915 for delusional insanity. His delusion was that he had been cursed to live forever, and was slowly turning into concrete as a result. The asylum closed in 1937, and its patients were dispersed. The Foundation found him decades later, following rumors of a patient who never moved and never aged. He looks like an ordinary man. He does not age. He shows no signs of having a metabolism at all. He does not eat, drink, or perspire, and demonstrates no other life function. He breathes only when he needs to speak. Apart from his eyes and his vocal apparatus, he is completely immobile. He has held the same position for decades without developing a single pressure sore, and his muscles show no atrophy. He converses normally, and has little knowledge of or interest in anything that has happened since he was committed. His containment consists of an armchair, preferably one facing a window, and music supplied as constantly as possible, restricted to pieces written no later than 1937. There is a camera in the room. The note appended to the file is from the doctor who assessed him. Interviewed without his history, the doctor writes, he would read as a sane and well-adjusted man who happens to be quadriplegic. Instead, the conclusion is that he believes he is concrete and will live forever, and so he has become as close to both as a person can get. Pipe Nightmare is SCP-015, a mass of pipes, vents, boilers, and plumbing apparatus that completely fills a warehouse. Current estimates put it at over 190 kilometers of pipe, ranging from 2.5 centimeters in diameter to over a meter. Some sections look new. Others are rusted and leaking. The materials are the first sign that something is wrong. Pipes have been recorded as bone, wood, steel, pressed ash, human flesh, glass, and granite. Not one pipe made of lead, copper, PVC, or any other standard plumbing material has ever been found in it. It grows when nobody is watching, extending outward through sewer lines and underground plumbing toward whatever buildings are nearby. It had already attached itself to 11 other structures before the Foundation cut it back to the warehouse. It also responds to intent. Anyone acting violently inside it, carrying tools, or attempting either to damage it or to repair it, triggers a reaction. The pipes nearest that person burst and spray them for several seconds, then stop. Recorded contents include oil, mercury, rats, an unidentified species of insect, ground glass, seawater, entrails, and molten iron. The bursting continues until the person leaves or dies. Containment is largely a matter of leaving it alone. A 2-meter gap is maintained around the structure, nothing is permitted to touch it, and any new protrusion is capped and logged. No tools of any kind go inside, no repairs are made. Exploration happens in teams of 3 on safety lines. 11 personnel have been killed and 20 more are still missing. Banging and screaming have been reported from inside. Sentient microorganism is 016, a blood-borne pathogen recovered from a mine worker who cut himself in a deep coal seam and got coal dust in the wound. Within days, it had spread through the mining camp and then into the CDC team sent to handle the outbreak. The Foundation took over, terminated everyone affected, took patient 0 into custody, and collapsed the mine shaft with explosives. Incubation runs anywhere from 24 hours to 2 years, and the length depends on how many other human hosts are nearby. The first symptoms look like a cold. Phase 2 starts at 48 hours and produces a controlled hemorrhagic fever that aspirates a small amount of blood into the lungs, which turns the host's breathing into an aerosol delivery system. Phase 3 is a full bleed-out. Hosts who survive that go dormant and return to incubation. What separates it from Ebola or Marburg is its response to stress. Put the host in a life-threatening situation, and the organism stops reproducing and starts rewriting the host's DNA instead, forcing rapid cell division. Major changes appear within a day, and complete bodily reconstruction takes about 2 weeks. Most hosts do not survive the demands it makes on the body. The ones who do become aggressive stop showing hemorrhagic symptoms and remain infectious. The test log is the clearest record of what it does. Flooding a subject's cell turned his lungs into gills, then his limbs into fins, and gave him echolocation. Another subject in identical conditions grew dense muscle and bone spurs on his knuckles and tried to punch through the steel door. A third, a former chemical engineer, grew an organ on his chest containing acetylene and oxygen gas sacs, and was shot once staff worked out what he was building. A fourth was told to grow wings with no stress applied, and simply died in Phase 3. Shadow Person is SCP-017, a humanoid figure roughly 80 centimeters tall, anatomically similar to a small child, but with no identifying features at all. It appears to be made of a shadowy, smoke-like shroud. Every attempt to find something underneath that shroud has failed, though the file does not rule out that something is there. Its behavior is the entire entry. When a shadow falls on it, it leaps at whatever cast that shadow and encloses the object completely in itself. Then it returns to its normal size, and the object is gone. Nothing is left behind. Containment follows directly from that. It is held in an acrylic glass cage a meter long, suspended at the center of a concrete room 6 meters square and 4 meters high. High-intensity arc lamp spotlights are mounted on the walls, the ceiling, and the floor, all aimed at the cage, so that light reaches it from every angle at once, and nothing can cast a shadow onto it. Control room staff monitor the lamps and the backup generator continuously, and a burnt-out bulb or a generator fault is reported for immediate maintenance. The only reason anyone is permitted to enter the room is to replace a lamp. Those who do wear full-body reflective suits, and the standing caution is not to step in front of a working spotlight. The object is classified Keter, and the classification rests on a single fact. Containing it requires that nothing in the room ever blocks a light. Superball is SCP-018, a red rubber superball 6 centimeters across, manufactured by the Wham-O Company in 1969. It was found when a contractor was hired to clear out a warehouse holding Wham-O stock. It bounces at over 200% efficiency. Dropped from 1 meter, it returns to 2, then 4, then 8, then 16. Each impact adds energy rather than losing it, which means it does not settle. It accelerates. Once loose, it reached speeds estimated above 100 kilometers an hour, damaged property, and injured 5 people. It came to rest several days later in a lake, where the water finally absorbed enough energy to stop it, and Foundation personnel recovered it there. The file notes that no cover story was needed, because it moved fast enough that none of its victims saw what hit them. Containment works on the same principle as the lake. The ball sits in a metal restraint inside a padded 1-meter box, and that box is submerged at the center of a 10-meter tank of polyethylene gel. If it breaks out of the box, the gel slows it enough for a retrieval team to reach it. Personnel entering the chamber wear plating and a breathing apparatus before being lowered into the tank. If it gets out of the tank entirely, the instruction is to seal yourself in another room and wait. 3 memos in the file record a researcher's proposal to build the ball into the sole of an armored boot. The reply describes the field test. The agent completed the mission, then malfunctioned into the air for nearly a mile, and came down in a lake with 2 broken legs, 7 broken ribs, a skull fracture, and one arm missing. The monster pot is SCP-019, a very large ceramic vase, 1.8 meters across the mouth and 2.4 meters tall. Its style and decoration point to classical Greece, but the date cannot be confirmed because no known method will break the surface to sample it. The file notes that if a method is ever found, the object is to be destroyed with prejudice. Entities emerge from it. They vary considerably, but tend to be small, roughly humanoid, sometimes with animal features, and consistently hostile. They attack with teeth and claws. They are fragile and notably flammable, but they are strong for their size and dangerous in numbers. Held at 0 degrees and left undisturbed, the vase produces about 1 entity per hour. Moving it, threatening it, extreme temperatures, sudden environmental changes, or putting anything inside it will all raise that rate, and introducing objects triggers what the file calls a flood reaction. Tipping the vase produces a reaction as though it had been full the whole time, even though anyone looking in from above sees only a dark hole. Its interior cannot be measured reliably and is suspected not to match its exterior. A captured specimen was kept in a pen with water and live chickens. It made continuous garbled vocalizations that were determined to be phonetically similar to Ancient Hellenic. It died in under 48 hours. Dissection found normal cellular biology attached to an unstable skeleton, an unstable respiratory system, almost no digestive tract, and virtually no other organs. The later notes track a different problem. Specimens began surviving the incinerator. Researchers describe this as evolution, and raise the possibility that the vase itself is sentient. Unseen mold is SCP-020, a fast-spreading fungal organism that alters the senses and behavior of the creatures it infects, humans included. It cannot be seen directly. Samples remain invisible even under a microscope. The only way a person sees it is through a photograph or a video feed. Once a colony establishes itself, usually inside a home, it releases spores that change the behavior of the people living there. They raise the heat and humidity in the house, which suits the organism. They also become noticeably more sociable and start inviting friends over, which spreads it further. Because none of them can see it, the mold sometimes grows directly on their bodies without their knowledge. As concentrations in the house approach critical levels, the residents' health collapses and they die. The spread continues from there, through the emergency responders who find the bodies, the medical staff who handle them, and the morgues they are taken to. It was first identified when an undercover agent noticed dramatic personality changes among staff at a local hospital. The containment team found that most of the town had been infected. The civilian population was terminated, and the town was incinerated under the cover of a flash forest fire. More than 12 outbreaks have been recorded since, and the source has not been identified. The mission recording from the initial containment is included in the file. A team approaching a house was met at the door by a woman holding a kitchen knife. On the surveillance feed, roughly 2/3 of her face was covered in growth. She did not respond to orders. She kept inviting them in. Skin worm is 021, a large, elaborate tattoo of a serpentine dragon in the Oriental style, covering about 8/10 of a square meter of skin. It is fully animate within the confines of its host's body and behaves roughly like an animal would, except in 2 dimensions rather than 3. It spends most of its time on and near the torso. Its movement causes constant pain. The file describes the sensation as large-scale tattooing, and tattoo removal happening at the same time. It feeds on pigment. Melanin counts, and a host losing melanin looks like a case of vitiligo, but it strongly prefers other tattoos and will hunt those down first. The feeding itself is painless. The ink simply disappears. It can strip more than half a square meter of skin per hour, never changes size, and produces no waste. Staff can feed it by quickly tattooing fruit or small animals onto the host. It transfers between people through physical contact. When a transfer works, the organism swims across from one body to the other. Sexual contact is the most reliable route at a 93% success rate, but the pain makes that impractical, so contact between 2 open wounds is preferred. The death of a host does not affect it, and it keeps eating. It does give something back. It speeds epinephrine release and reuptake, reduces lactic acid buildup, and provides bursts of strength, confidence and pain tolerance with less exhaustion afterward. It also appears to help the immune system. The limit is endurance. Some hosts have taken their own lives. Hosting it exempts a Class D subject from the monthly terminations, which is the only compensation the file offers. The Morgue is 022, a morgue in the basement of a hospital in Great Britain. Nothing anomalous was reported there until 1 November in the 1980s, when the reports started. The Foundation quarantined the site and put out a story that the building had been condemned. Why the properties appeared when they did is still unresolved. A drawer opens at random, revealing a cadaver under a sheet. About 6 minutes later, the body animates and tries to leave. At that point, it is designated SCP-022-1. Bodies too damaged or decomposed to stand simply twitch on the table until they stop, after which the table slides back into the drawer and closes. Staff report the smell of burnt tissue immediately afterward. Whatever powers these bodies has not been identified. They do not breathe, eat, or sleep, and they generate no heat. Post-mortem analysis finds no abnormal organs or chemicals. They are, by every measure available, ordinary human cadavers. They are also stronger than they should be, by roughly 500 newtons of lifting force. Severing a limb leaves the animation with whichever piece has the greatest mass. Destroying the head does not stop one. The torso and legs keep moving. Total tissue destruction is the only reliable method. Left alone, an instance simply runs out somewhere between 2 days and 3 weeks. The bodies match cadavers reported stolen from morgues across the country. Nobody knows how they get there. Nothing can be added to the morgue. Objects sent inside vanish, then reappear in the room directly above, exactly 183 seconds later, rusted and rotted. People do not reappear in that pile. They are absorbed into the morgue and may come back later as instances. Black Shuck is 023, a large, sexless, shaggy black canine standing 1.5 meters at the shoulder, with bright orange-red eyes and prominent teeth. Making eye contact with it kills someone. Not necessarily the person who looked. Either that individual or a member of their immediate family will die exactly 1 year after eye contact is broken. Research into how the victim is chosen was suspended, but the available data suggests that a larger family lowers the odds that the viewer dies personally, and no pattern or preference among victims has been found. It is not known whether the selection happens at the start of the year or at the end. Attempts to preempt the effect by terminating a viewer and their entire family before the year elapsed are recorded, and the outcome is expunged. The bodies look untouched from the outside. Inside, every organ system and the entire circulatory system have been filled in with highly compacted ash, and the muscle, bone, and brain tissue all show exposure to extreme heat. It also has a requirement about where it is kept. If its enclosure does not at least superficially resemble a crossroads, it phases through the walls to reach the nearest place that does, incinerating everything it passes through. So it is contained in a walled-off intersection of 2 corridors, with false doors at 3 of the 4 ends. Its eye sockets are packed with hard rubber inserts, replaced individually and only after full dark, and staff are never to look into the sockets. After one incident, no reflective surface of any kind is permitted within 30 meters, including the monitors showing its own security feed. Game Show of Death is 024, an abandoned soundstage. It has been derelict since some point in the 20th century, and whether its properties predate the abandonment is unknown. It was found after a group of teenagers broke in, and one of them walked back out and turned herself in to the police. Anyone who enters is greeted over the intercom by an announcer who can hear and respond to them. He explains that they are contestants on a game show, that the prizes are substantial, that the game is extremely hazardous, and that the losers will never leave. Then he offers them a choice. Anyone who declines is immediately put outside and can never return, blocked by an invisible barrier. Anyone who accepts is led to the course. The game changes every time. So do the rules. Sometimes there is one winner. Sometimes teams are encouraged. The obstacles start harmless and become lethal, and the announcer talks the whole way through, offering advice, making conversation, and adding new rules as he goes. If everyone dies, he expresses disappointment at the lack of a winner, and the building shuts down until new contestants arrive. Cheating is handled by studio guardians, which appear when he calls for them and vanish when he does not. The offender is removed and never seen again. Winners describe the Guardians as huge, shadowy shapes that engulf a person, though on the recordings they appear as costumed humanoids in masks. The recordings are the strange part. After every game, a tape appears in the mailbox outside, a complete record shot from angles no contestant ever saw, with a live studio audience cheering in the background that nobody inside the building has ever seen. A well-worn wardrobe is SCP-025, a wooden wardrobe holding clothing that spans the 1920s to the present. Individually, the garments are designated SCP-025-1, and they have exactly one thing in common. Every one of them is damaged. Moth holes, torn seams, missing sleeves, shredded hems. Wearing any of them results in injury or death within 24 hours, and the damage always corresponds to the flaw in the garment. A glove with a missing fingertip costs a fingertip, and it happens through something as ordinary as a kitchen accident. A poncho with a missing sleeve costs the arm, by animal attack or a crash that forces an amputation. Nothing at the scene ever looks anomalous. Sealed in an empty room, the effect finds another route. The wearer contracts a flesh-eating infection starting in the uncovered areas, or an organ fails directly beneath a hole in the fabric. The test log makes the mechanism plain. A subject in a tuxedo with a torn left shoulder seam attacked his supervising agent and was cut down with a knife, an inch deep, exactly at the tear. A subject in a baseball cap missing its size adjuster picked up a handgun after 4 hours of doing nothing, and it discharged into his forehead where the adjustment band would have sat. A subject in a moth-eaten sweater vest was shot 6 times, and every round passed through an existing hole, leaving the garment untouched. The same vest was then put on the shooter, who was placed alone in an empty room with nothing but ceiling lights. 2 hours later, 2 of the tubes fell, shattered on the holes, and impaled him through the gaps. The Vermin God is 027, a phenomenon of unknown origin attached to one living person at a time. The host is permanently surrounded by vermin, drawn to wherever he happens to be. He has no control over them at all, and is bitten and scratched by the wilder specimens regularly. They also attack anyone who comes too close to him. The pattern is consistent. Within 2 or 3 minutes of the host settling anywhere, a cloud of gnats and flies forms around him. Crawling animals follow: lice, cockroaches, worms, spiders, mice, rats. The longer he stays, the more arrive. When he leaves, a few follow and most disperse. The first known host was found in the 1990s in an abandoned warehouse overrun by rats and roaches. He was a man in his late 30s, gaunt, filthy, covered in bites, in poor mental health and badly sleep-deprived. He died in Foundation custody. The autopsy found that more than 70% of his body had been affected, and that a colony of rats had been nesting in his abdomen for at least several generations. Between 140 and 150 hours after his death, a security officer at the site woke up unable to breathe properly, because a large housefly had crawled into his nose and laid eggs. He became the second host. That transfer is why the containment procedures read the way they do. High-value personnel are kept at least 200 meters away, because nobody knows how the next transfer will choose. The officer's own account is short. He is scared and he itches, and he says he feels no presence inside him at all. His question in the interview is about whether he will see his family again. Knowledge is 028, and there is nothing there to look at. It occupies an abandoned storage yard outside a copper mine in northern Michigan, has no detectable physical presence of any kind, and returns no abnormal readings on any instrument. Its effect fills a cube roughly 2 meters on a side around a point staff treat as its center. Adding objects, removing objects, or digging out the soil beneath it changes nothing about the size, the shape, or the effect. Anyone who steps into that cube receives, within 3 to 6 seconds, total and complete knowledge of a single subject. The knowledge is perfect and eidetic. The subject is entirely random, and so is its usefulness. Some people do not notice what they have been given for a long time afterward. The retrieval log gives the range. Every phone book entry for New York City in 1998. How to rebuild an internal combustion engine to run on human blood using only existing parts, at higher efficiency than gasoline. The location of the keys to a Buick LeSabre. Proper care for a mole rat colony. the geological structure beneath Greenland, the origin and history of 12 SCP objects. It was found because a local miner submitted a cold fusion reactor design to the patent office and told reporters it had come to him out of the blue. The design was later used in the containment of another anomaly. The effect can be repeated by stepping out and back in, at the cost of increasingly severe migraines after the second exposure. Not everyone survives it. One subject wept, curled up, went unresponsive for days, said, "This is not life," and died of shock. An agent exposed by accident laughed, drew his sidearm, and killed 2 colleagues. Staff who enter are now detained indefinitely. The Homunculus is 030, a hairless, genderless gray figure 71 centimeters tall and weighing under 13 kilograms. Its eyes are solid blue with no iris or pupil, described in the file as resembling small-cut sapphires. It speaks with an androgynous voice and a pronounced English accent that matches no modern region. It reads and writes ancient Greek, Latin, Italian, English, Spanish, and Portuguese, plus 2 languages nobody has been able to identify, which it insists should be common knowledge. Its grasp of physics, chemistry, astronomy, mathematics, and horticulture is roughly that of a 17th century academic, but it also knows lines of research in those fields that do not appear in the historical record at all. That is the reason the Foundation keeps it as a consultant rather than an exhibit. It runs on light. With a 15 lumen source within 1.5 meters, it is active. In darkness, it goes inert, showing no outward signs of life, and returns within 5 to 10 seconds of light, appearing to wake from a light nap regardless of how long it was out. It does not need the rest, and has said it would rather stay awake. Biopsies find clays native to Kent, Surrey, and Greater London, with traces of mandrake, lye, mercury, and human blood in every sample. It does not breathe, eat, or produce waste, though it does occasionally ask for a bath. It can be damaged but feels no pain, and simply remolds itself. Human hands cannot shape it. Tools can. It calls itself Ariel, and asks staff to do the same. Asked who made it, it gives the same answer in the same cadence every time. It has been asked to forget that, and it is terribly sorry. 031 is known as the question, "What is love?" An amorphous organism weighing over 7.5 tons, contained inside the Ryugyong Hotel in Pyongyang. Its tendrils run through the building's plumbing and ductwork to all 105 floors. At its peak, it had contaminated over 75% of the hotel's 3,000 rooms. Each tendril ends in a pod about 2 meters long, covered in fine cilia. Someone who encounters one may instead perceive a person they were once close to. The pod then reshapes itself into that person and tries to persuade the subject to stay with it. Then it touches them. Digestive fluid is injected, the flesh is consumed and absorbed into the organism's mass, and a second structure engulfs the skull, replacing the brain's blood vessels with its own tendrils, and keeping the brain alive by means nobody has identified. The head is then carried back through the ductwork to the central mass. Drone footage indicates thousands of crania held in that network. The file states the brains inside are still alive, and may be conscious. It was recovered in 1948 from a refugee camp where civilians had gathered around a figure they called the Beloved. At that point, it weighed 75 kilograms, could not consume anyone, and did nothing but inspire devotion. It was classified safe. The Korean conflict destroyed the site holding it, and it was the only anomaly never recovered. It resurfaced in 1992, when construction on the hotel stopped and the workers began disappearing. The task force sent in was lost entirely. The last section of the file is a records dispute. 2 containment teams work the same building, one for this organism and one for a mind-affecting stele. Neither can perceive the other. Their staff cannot find each other at the entrance, even with time-stamped photographs proving they are both there. Brother's Bride is 032, a human simulacrum with the outward appearance of a woman near 30. The shell is pigmented silicone 5.5 millimeters thick over plastic fiber polymers. There is no skeleton and no musculature. The interior is refined oil. It walks and speaks regardless. At a distance, it passes for human. Up close, it does not, and most observers find it uncomfortable to look at. That reaction has been assessed as ordinary, not anomalous. Its effect targets anything alive that humanity did not shape. Wild plants lose the ability to photosynthesize. Animals lose the use of their respiratory and digestive systems. Microorganisms are damaged in their reproductive systems instead, and the working theory is that the ones which live alongside humans are partially shielded by that relationship. Human staff are not directly harmed, but exposure is capped at 12 hours because of the damage to beneficial microorganisms. It arrived on its own. Security found it sitting on the doorstep of a Foundation site in Slovakia. No camera recorded it approaching. It explained its own effects, said it was there to be stored, and when asked why, said it was following the instruction of its creators and seeking indefinite storage until claimed. In interview, it insists it is not sapient, only an instrument. It has no name, because people have names and it is not one. It describes a man its creators are punishing, someone who won when he should have lost, condemned to wander alone and destroy whatever he approaches. The occasional moment of comfort he still finds is what they intend to take. It is the instrument for that. Asked why he will recognize it, the answer is 4 words. It used to be his wife. The missing number is 033, a field of mathematical notation ranging from symbols any layperson would recognize to material only trained mathematicians can read. The sum of those symbols equals an integer that was not previously known to exist, falling between 2 integers that were. The professor who first studied it named it theta prime. His explanation is the clearest part of the file. Every schoolchild knows that after 2 comes 3, and after 3 comes 4. This formula demonstrates that a number was missed. His analogy is a world where all technology was built on the belief that 4 is followed by 6, because nobody ever conceived of 5. Because every modern calculation was performed without it, introducing it to any system erodes that system's numerical integrity, and then its structural integrity. Written on ordinary paper, it fades into unintelligibility in exactly 2,560 seconds, and takes the paper with it. In one trial, a second sheet placed 30 centimeters away began reproducing the symbols within 80 seconds, held the full formula by 160, and both sheets then turned wet, then to pulp, then to nothing. So it is stored on handmade vellum with no parallel borders, no right angles, and no 2 sides of equal length. The theory is that human irregularity denies it a pattern to work with, and that the uneven borders leave it searching for an exit it cannot find. The professor's caveat is that it should not sit on anything for more than a few days, because it will find a pattern eventually. There is no safe specification for electronic storage. His assessment of what happens if it reaches the internet is a full infrastructure collapse within hours. Obsidian Ritual Knife is SCP-034, a primitive knife made from pure obsidian, dated to roughly 1,000 years old. Despite its age and crude construction, it remains extremely sharp and has never needed maintenance to hold its edge. Analysis suggests South American origin and ritual use, supported by conquistador accounts of priests flaying victims alive with similar knives and wearing the skin as tribute. Flesh cut from a living person with this knife, pressed against someone else's skin, transfers that first person's physical identity to the second. Not just appearance, height, weight, muscle mass, bone density, hair growth, eyesight, strength, existing medical conditions. The only thing that does not carry over is a wound made by the knife itself. 1 square centimeter is enough, and the exchange rate is fixed. 1 hour of transformation for every square centimeter used. When the time runs out, the subject reverts. Personality and memory stay intact throughout, and the change itself takes only seconds, but subjects describe it as extremely painful, and the psychological effects scale with how different the new body is. The donor has to stay alive. If the person whose identity was taken dies, the effect ends immediately. Testing confirms the boundaries. A dead donor produces nothing. A comatose donor works normally. A brain-dead donor leaves the subject unconscious for the full duration, and a terminally ill donor passes the illness across so completely that both died at the same moment. The Foundation acquired it because someone used it properly. A man wearing a Foundation doctor's identity walked into a site. He was caught only because the real doctor was found tied up at home with a large section of his right arm skinned. Under interrogation, he described an unknown benefactor, instructions to infiltrate and wait, and enough skin to stay inside for weeks. Possessive mask is SCP-035, a white porcelain comedy mask that occasionally changes to tragedy. When it does, every existing image of it changes to match, including photographs, video footage, and illustrations already in the archive. A corrosive, viscous liquid seeps constantly from its eye and mouth holes. Anything it touches decays until it becomes more of the same liquid. Glass resists longest, which is why the mask is kept in glass. Living tissue reacts the same way, with no recovery. The liquid is only visible from the front and does not appear on the other side of the mask at all. Anyone within about 2 meters or in visual contact feels a strong urge to put it on. Doing so overwrites the wearer's brain activity and causes brain death. What speaks afterward claims to be the consciousness in the mask. The host body then decays rapidly toward a mummified state, and the mask keeps operating it well past the point where movement should be mechanically possible. It works on anything humanoid, including mannequins, corpses, and statues. It is articulate, flattering, and scores in the 99th percentile on every test administered. It also prompted staff to suicide, reduced others to near-mindless servants using nothing but conversation, and organized an escape attempt that several researchers helped with. It is telepathic with or without a host, reaching into the subconscious for material to use. The later addenda track the cell rather than the mask. The walls began secreting contaminated human blood, forming paragraphs in Italian, Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, alongside diagrams of ritual sacrifice in which staff recognized themselves and their families. Suicide rates in that section reached an all-time high, including among people who had never had contact with it. The Reincarnation pilgrimage of the Yazidi is 036, and it is not an object. It is an annual event that runs between 2 airports, one of which does not appear on any satellite image. Shortly before dawn on September 23rd, an unscheduled passenger plane appears on radar about 30 to 40 kilometers out from a small airport in the Mosul region of northern Iraq. The make and model change from year to year. It lands without identifying itself, opens its doors, and the passengers walk into the terminal. No crew ever leaves the aircraft. Observers have seen only a masked pilot and co-pilot. The plane departs immediately without waiting for clearance. The passengers are Yazidi. Each year the Foundation identifies them through birth certificates, photo identification, specific knowledge questions, and fingerprints where possible, as people of the Yazidi faith who died during the preceding 12 months. They are friendly and cooperative, though reluctant to discuss the Kira's Guhorîn, the Kurdish term for changing garments that describes their belief in reincarnation. None of them can recognize family or friends, and none retain anything beyond short-term memory. By late afternoon, they begin insisting that the pilgrimage must begin. They board a second aircraft, crewed by trained Yazidi holy men, and depart. That flight is gone for 7 days and returns at sunrise on October 1st. Its crew and its recording equipment can account for a few hours. The rest of the time is simply missing from the cameras and the clocks, with nothing unusual recorded in between. The destination is a runway and a single building at coordinates that do not appear on satellite imagery. A reconnaissance overflight weeks beforehand showed undeveloped land and what looked like an ancient stone statue. A task force that tried to reach it on foot during the pilgrimage lost communication and was never heard from again. Dwarf star is SCP-037, a star roughly 5 centimeters in diameter. Its luminosity is about a trillionth of our sun's, and its surface temperature sits near 5,000 Kelvin. Analysis finds it shares most properties with an ordinary main sequence star. The only thing wrong with it is the size. It was found above the Beaufort Sea near the North Magnetic Pole. A Canadian Forces station reported intense electromagnetic interference, followed by an extremely bright object descending toward the water. A Foundation vessel responded and found it wavering on an erratic trajectory about 200 meters above the surface. The working theory is that it entered the magnetosphere through the pole itself. Containment works by magnetism. The object aligns itself to powerful electromagnets according to its own magnetic field, which is how it is both held and moved. The larger problem is what it emits. Its electromagnetic output is intense enough to be seen with the naked eye from high Earth orbit, so it is kept deep underground, both to hide it and to let it shed heat. The facility and the surrounding volume of the Earth's crust function as the heat sink. The concern in the file is what happens next. Over the years of study, the emitted radiation has shifted, which indicates the star is progressing through stellar evolution at a vastly accelerated rate. If standard models hold, its radius will increase by a factor of 100 to 300, with a matching rise in radiated energy. Beyond that, its life cycle terminates in a nova. A 1977 memorandum records the alternative under consideration: embedding agents in the U.S. Department of Defense to alter the NASA orbiter program so the shuttle could carry the star off the planet. The Everything Tree is 038, found on an abandoned farm in New York and initially taken for a common apple tree. Closer inspection established that it was growing things other than apples, and in fact things other than fruit. Anything that touches its bark is cloned. Growth begins almost instantly and reaches maturity within minutes. The catalog of what it has produced runs from apples, oranges, watermelons, and eggplants through candy bars and snack foods to televisions, toasters, laptops, keys, chairs, wine, DVDs, cats, dogs, and people. There is a hard ceiling of 90.9 kilograms, or exactly 200 pounds. A 400-pound steel ingot was pressed against the bark, and the copy grew at normal speed, then stopped partway. The severed end had a rough texture resembling miniature tree bark. The finished piece weighed 90.91 kilograms. Living clones do not last. Humans and animals produced this way age rapidly and survive about 2 weeks. Examination of the bodies found that they had begun to ferment before death. The remaining addenda are a site director asking staff to stop cloning their car keys, their music, and the vending machine. Monkey Brain is SCP-039, a group of 23 proboscis monkeys that have been surgically rebuilt. The eyes are gone, with new bone filling the sockets and smooth skin where the lids and brows should be. The mouth is gone the same way, with no opening, no lips, the jaw fused at the joints, and the teeth, tongue, gums, and palate replaced by fat tissue. The digestive system has been removed entirely, from esophagus to bladder, with fat formations of the same shape left in its place, and the anus sealed over. How they take in nutrition, or dispose of waste, or survive without either, is not established. What remains is sharper. Their hearing, touch, and smell are all measurably better than the baseline species, enough to navigate without sight, and they tap objects while moving through unfamiliar spaces in what may be rudimentary echolocation. They score consistently higher than unaltered proboscis monkeys on every cognitive test given. They also breed. 5 have been born in containment, each with the same alterations, despite no genetic divergence from the species at all. They were recovered in 1998 from an abandoned Prometheus Labs facility in Nevada, alongside power tools, a partially disassembled car, 20 cages with the doors removed, and the bodies of 3 researchers killed by blunt trauma and bearing chimpanzee bite marks. The monkeys had been taught to change tires, run an oil change, and assemble an engine. The site also held SCP-039-A, a man named Jacob who received the same procedure. His account of why he agreed is the center of the file. He was homeless, he was addicted, and the offer was that he would never need food, water, or a fix again. He kept that bargain. His summary is that they removed his face and removed the monkey with it. Evolution's child is 040, a human child who can reshape living organisms at will. It is classified as an anomalous human rather than an object, and the file reads more like a care plan than a containment document. The subject was about 8 years old at containment in 2008. It is 111 centimeters tall, has bright pink hair that is brittle and falls out easily, 1 green eye and 1 yellow eye with a black sclera, and is blind on the left side. Its skin burns and bruises easily. The ability is mostly cosmetic at its simplest. Running from color and pattern changes up to real shifts in body structure. Building new specialized organs is the outer edge of what it can do, and currently fails 2 times out of 3. Whatever it makes has to be physically possible. It can give an animal wings, but those wings will not fly unless everything else about the body supports it. Every creature it modifies becomes intensely loyal to it, regardless of what that creature was before. Using the ability takes real concentration and leaves it with headaches and nausea after a few minutes. 3 of its creations live with it, approved for its mental well-being. One is a symbiotic organism that functions as a jacket and feeds from its bloodstream, sharing most of its genome with the house cat. One is a flying sphere with 11 limbs that can reproduce music. One is a four-legged, eyeless animal covered in pink and blue fur that it sometimes rides. It was recovered from a charter school raided for a former intelligence operative, one of 15 children found there, and the only one with an anomaly. Asked about its parents, it said the man running the school told it that it did not have any. It answers to 40. It has no other name. Thought broadcasting patient is SCP-041, a man with irreversible damage to his central nervous system, believed to have followed a rare strain of bacterial meningitis. The antibiotics cleared the infection, but the membranes around his brain and spinal cord severed most of the connections between his central nervous system and the rest of his body. He is kept alive by a ventilator, a pacemaker, and a feeding tube. To look at, he is in a persistent vegetative state. What actually happens is that everyone within about 10 meters of him starts hearing each other think. Any thought formed in words gets broadcast to everyone in range as semi-audible speech, in whatever voice the thinker uses internally, and no equipment can record it. He can broadcast his own thoughts as well, though he rarely does. Images travel too, but poorly. It works best when both people close their eyes. The sender concentrates on a single object with no background, and the receiver clears their head. Even then, the receiver tends to fill in the gaps and ends up seeing something different. The hardest thing to transmit is a human face, especially one in motion. He does not talk much. Attempts to get him to explain his own condition have gone nowhere, and he usually ignores direct questions. He does have a sense of humor and interjects into other people's conversations. The containment procedure that stands out is the sitter. A staff member is assigned to sit in his room and watch television, concentrating on the program so that he can watch it through their mind. The file specifies that the ideal sitter is someone whose attention does not wander. He has been known to push sitters toward programming they do not enjoy. A formerly winged horse is 042, an animal believed to belong to the genus Equus. Its coat is white with small brown spotting. It stands 183 centimeters at the withers and weighs 710 kilograms, down significantly since entering custody through a combination of atrophy and refusal to eat. A forced liquid diet keeps it alive. 2 large bone protrusions extend from its back, ending 37 centimeters above the skin and emerging through open, ragged wounds. The musculature they connect to is powerful and now atrophied. No healing has ever been observed at those wounds, though enough clotting must occur to keep it from bleeding out. It is listless and unresponsive. Handlers cannot get it to do anything. Left alone, it lies down and stays there, not moving to eat, drink, or relieve itself. Pain conditioning will get it up long enough to be cleaned, but it lies back down regardless of the strength of the shock, up to the point of losing consciousness. The ground it walks on goes parched no matter how much it is watered, and the watering program was discontinued as a risk to the local water table. Researchers disagree about whether it is intelligent. It makes eye contact with people entering the paddock, and most describe the look as pleading. It has injured itself on equipment and fencing repeatedly, which one side of the argument reads as deliberate. The addendum records a doctor who arranged its transfer, forged the paperwork to get it onto an aircraft, and then took the controls and put the plane into a dive. During the recovery, the horse broke loose, killed 2 guards, then walked over to him and touched its muzzle to his face. He showed euphoria while contact held. When it was tranquilized and the contact broke, he did not recover. The Beatle is SCP-043, a vinyl copy of the White Album by the Beatles. The anomaly starts with the surface. The record has no grooves at all. Despite that, it plays from start to finish regardless of where the needle is set down. The album runs normally until the 29th track. Instead of Revolution 9, the disc stops spinning and faint breathing becomes audible. Occasionally, whatever is doing the breathing speaks, in a male voice. It answers questions. It has an encyclopedic command of the music industry, of musical theory, and of obscure trivia about a very large number of bands and artists. Researchers have gotten a great deal out of it on those subjects. There are 2 things it will not discuss. It refuses to answer any question about itself, and it refuses to answer any question about the Beatles. Containment is minimal. The file states that no special measures are required, only a recommendation that the record not be used for anything other than testing, and a turntable kept in the same room. Inside the jacket, staff found a small handwritten note. It reads, "Limited edition, 1 of 1. Thanks, John." World War II era Molecular-Fission cannon is 044. It's a howitzer built in the Second World War by Krupp engineers. It weighs 251 tons, which means it stays rail-mounted and needs 2 freight locomotives to move. It also has no breech. The rear of the barrel is a massive air compression chamber instead, so the gun is loaded through the muzzle. Anything that fits can be used as ammunition. The working theory is that the gun weakens molecular and atomic bonds in whatever is loaded into it. How it does that is not known, largely because the housing is packed with mechanisms nobody has been able to account for. Some of them appear to serve no function at all beyond spinning or making noise, and they do it whether or not the gun is supplied with power. Both equipment and personnel have been lost exploring the inside of the barrel. When fired, everything in the barrel leaves as a single glowing red slug sized in proportion to the mass loaded. On striking anything solid, the slug detonates with a yield proportional to that original mass, at a mass-to-energy conversion rate the file redacts but describes as substantial. Leaving the load in the barrel longer raises the yield further. The largest recorded yield came from loading the administrator's personal diesel pickup truck into the muzzle in one piece. It is classified safe. The reasoning is that it has not been involved in any significant incidents in the years the Foundation has held it. An 05 note appended to the file adds that the bare incident does not count. Atmospheric converter is 045, an icosahedron of ice-12 with an average radius of 1.7 meters, shot through with flat internal fractures in a regular pattern. Ice-12 normally forms only within a narrow band of very high pressures and temperatures. This one is roughly twice the density it should be. It holds its shape across an enormous range, from a fraction of a degree above absolute zero up to 500 Kelvin, and across pressures from near vacuum to tens of thousands of atmospheres. Push it outside that, and it can be melted or vaporized, but the water pulls itself back together and refreezes as soon as conditions allow. Anything separated before refreezing comes back as a smaller icosahedron with identical properties. The current assessment is that what we can see is a 3-dimensional projection of a 4-dimensional solid, a figure with 600 tetrahedral faces. Every 2 weeks to 3 months, it rotates around multiple axes at once for up to 73 seconds, producing small earthquakes in the immediate area. Prevented from rotating, those tremors climb logarithmically to magnitude 5.3. The hazard is what it does to air. Nitrogen within 3.7 meters is replaced by liquid water. Argon is replaced by table salt. Nitrogen is 78% of the atmosphere. It was found in 1972 by a Foundation submarine investigating unusually localized tremors on the Pacific abyssal plain. It was wedged in a crevice, which had been preventing it from rotating. Freed and brought toward the vessel, it came within range of the interior atmosphere. 12 crew were lost before it could be released. Predatory hollybush is SCP-046, a botanical mass in southwestern Kentucky made up of white oak, European holly, and Kentucky honeysuckle, with offshoots of other species. The ground around it, out to 20 meters, is designated its feeding area. It draws people. Anyone within a 50-kilometer radius who is carrying a life-threatening injury or illness, or a psychological condition that pushes them towards self-destruction, feels a strong compulsion to travel to it and lie face down in front of it. Those who arrive describe having dreamed the location. Screening confirms they had no prior knowledge of the site or of the Foundation. What happens next depends on which version of the file you read. The current document describes a rapid attack by saprophytic organisms and opportunistic infections, including flesh-eating bacteria, a paralytic fungal spore, and unidentified insects that emerge from inside the mass during the final stage of feeding. It reads as predation. The superseded document, preserved in the file, describes the same event differently. It records that pain and traumatic symptoms recede on entering the clearing, replaced by calm and euphoria. Vines and grass grow over the body. Subjects remain able to talk until they are no longer visible, and every one of them describes peace and relief at dying pleasantly. That version notes the effect only manifests on people who are willing. The reclassification is on record. O5 Command ordered the file rewritten to emphasize the volatile and lethal nature of the object and to remove every reference to voluntary subjects. The head researcher's objection is preserved beneath it, arguing there was no evidence of predation and that some things must be contained simply because they are strange. He was removed from the project. The order stands. Microbial mutagen is 047, a heavily rusted gas cylinder with a breach torn in it. Exposed to open air, the metal of the cylinder itself evaporates slowly and produces a mutagenic gas that had not been documented before. The gas does nothing to human beings directly. Eukaryotic organisms are unaffected. What it alters is prokaryotes, and it shows a clear preference for the ordinary bacteria already living on human skin and throughout the human body. Most of the time, nothing useful comes of that. Occasionally, it produces what the file calls a superbug, a normally harmless resident organism with enough added survivability to become an opportunistic pathogen. The pattern of changes suggests those outcomes are being selected for rather than occurring at random. The consistent traits across those mutations are full-spectrum antibiotic resistance, faster reproduction, better survival in the bacterium's native environment, new spore-forming ability in gram-positive species, better plasmid sharing in gram-negative species, and higher transmission overall. 3 strains are documented in detail. A mutated acne bacterium colonizes the skin and shifts its pH until the skin structure breaks down and the subject goes septic, at roughly 40% mortality. A mutated oral streptococcus produces mouth and throat sores, enters the bloodstream through them, and kills by endocarditis at roughly 35%, and it can persist indefinitely by sporulation. The third, a mutated Clostridium, was grown from tissue culture and never exposed to a person. Its pathogenicity, transmission, and lethality are all listed as unknown, and no samples remain. The recovery log explains the class. The cylinder was breached inside a Foundation laboratory during an unrelated containment attempt. The single release of gas produced a bloom of uncounted strains and killed every member of staff in the lab within hours. The cursed SCP number is 048, and there is no object attached to it. The anomaly, if there is one, is the designation itself. The pattern is what the file documents. Any item assigned this number tends to be destroyed, decommissioned, stolen, or otherwise lost to the Foundation, and generally through nobody's fault. Personnel assigned to SCP-048 in its various incarnations have shown a 50% higher turnover rate than normal, through death, dismemberment, and disciplinary action. The file is explicit that nobody knows whether the number carries any supernatural property. The stated reason for retiring it is morale. The containment procedure is one sentence. The designation is removed from the catalog, and no future object is to be assigned this number. The addenda are the record of that holding. The first is a researcher declaring the whole thing ridiculous, calling his colleagues superstitious, and reassigning the number to a new object to prove the point. The second, filed by an O5, notes that the object in question was accidentally thrown in the trash that morning and lost, and adds that in an unrelated incident, the researcher's arms were traumatically amputated in a lunchroom blender accident. The number was closed again. The third addendum records the slot being cleared for a different reason. An article had appeared claiming the Foundation held a vampire boat, and no such thing had ever existed. The conclusion was that a junior researcher had tried to save a story idea to his hard drive and instead overwrote the blank slot reserved for 048. He was removed from archival duties. The number remains retired. Plague Doctor is SCP-049, a humanoid entity about 1.9 meters tall with the appearance of a medieval plague doctor. The robes and the beaked ceramic mask are not clothing. The robes and gloves are a thick hide built up on the skin, and the mask is chitin grown out of the bones of the face. X-rays confirm a human skeletal structure underneath. It speaks several languages and prefers English or medieval French. It claims to have originated in 15th century France. In ordinary conversation, it is cordial, professional, and cooperative. It addresses Foundation doctors as colleagues. What changes that is what it calls the pestilence. It cannot describe the disease, cannot identify it, and when asked directly whether it meant the bubonic plague, It answered that it did not know what that was. It nonetheless detects the pestilence in specific people, and when it does, it kills them by direct skin contact through a mechanism autopsies have never explained. It then operates on the corpse with instruments from a black bag whose interior is larger than its exterior. Successful surgeries produce reanimated bodies with no memory and no higher function, which SCP-049 describes as cured. It was found in Montauban after a series of disappearances. Police engaged the reanimated instances in the house while it stood aside taking notes in a journal written in no known language. When they were finished, it entered custody willingly. The incident that changed its containment came in 2017. Dr. Raymond Ham, who had interviewed it for months without any aggression, entered the chamber for a routine session. The entity became anxious and asked whether he was feeling well. Ham reminded it that the interview was required. It killed him and had converted him before anyone found the body 3 hours later. Asked to explain, it said only that he was sick and that it had shown him mercy. Japanese obstetrical model is SCP-051, a 25-centimeter anatomical figure of a woman carved from ivory, with Asian features and jointed at the shoulders, hips, and knees. Microscopic analysis confirms the hair set into its head is human. The abdomen lifts off as a separate ivory cap, revealing a carved ribcage and organs, and a 2.5-centimeter ivory fetus attached to the figure by a leather cord. Brought near a pregnant woman, it ends the pregnancy. Reports describe a gentle compulsion to pick the model up, open the abdominal cap, and lift the fetus out. Nausea and cramping follow within 5 minutes. Bleeding begins as spotting and can progress to hemorrhage within the next half hour. Miscarriage follows within 2 to 24 hours in most recorded cases, and medical records show moderate to severe defects in the fetuses. Pregnancies that reach term after exposure produce severely deformed live births. The file records deaths of mothers and infants terminated after delivery by the attending physician. Witnesses to those births required Class A amnestics to recover. The second half of the entry is a fragment of rice paper found alongside it, designated SCP-051-A. The ink is plant-derived and dates to the 12th century, and the characters are an early dialect of Japanese. The surviving text is part of a prayer or spell against demons that attack unborn children. The incantation orders those forces into the model rather than into a pregnant woman, and claims to trap them there. The paper has degraded far enough that the full incantation, and any instructions that went with it, cannot be recovered. It reached the Foundation after 60 years in a museum archive, and a run of incidents involving secretaries, researchers, and students. Time-traveling train is 052, a Type R4 New York City subway car. Official records show it was built in 1932 and sold for scrap in 1975. It continues to arrive on the uptown track at the 59th Street and 8th Avenue station at 11:57 p.m. every Saturday, in perfect condition, labeled as an A train. It stops, holds its doors open for about 5 minutes, then closes them and disappears. It never carries passengers in, only out. Most people who board are not recovered. The ones who step off give boarding dates ranging from 1976 to 2204, and none of them remember any time spent on the train. The recovered passenger log is the substance of the file. An accountant boarded in 2012 and stepped off in 2008, unharmed, and is held indefinitely because she already exists in this timeline. A man boarded in 1976 on his way to Studio 54 and stepped off 32 years later, held because the psychiatrist judged the gap too wide to reintegrate. A tourist from Jacksonville boarded in 2014, stepped off in 2009, and now speaks Albanian instead of English. The tests went worse. 2 agents were sent in and never came back. One of them turned up dead in 1980. A third returned 14 days later with his hands surgically removed and a note in his pocket reading, "Send no more." A fourth entered at some unknown future date in violation of protocol, and his body was thrown from the train and landed 10 meters away. The last passenger claims to be a supervisor from something called the SCP Federation, who boarded in 2124, having taken an amnestic first specifically to avoid what happened to the other 2. Young girl is SCP-053, a girl of about 3 years old. She speaks at a basic level and tests slightly above average for her development. Staff describe her as pleasant. She rarely gets upset, and the only thing that reliably agitates her is being around groups of people. Anyone over the age of 3 who makes eye contact with her, touches her, or stays in the room longer than 10 minutes becomes irrational, paranoid, and homicidal. The hostility settles on her, but not first. Affected subjects kill or drive off every other person they can see before they get to her. Anyone who does reach her and manages to injure her dies within seconds of a massive heart attack or seizure. She regenerates from any wound almost instantly, whatever the severity. She appears to know none of this. She ignores affected people entirely, and when asked about the effect, she is incapable of answering. The containment procedures are the clearest statement of what the Foundation thinks it is dealing with. She gets a room of at least 5 meters square with space to move, toys, books, and games rotated every 3 months, proper bedding, 3 meals a day, and 2 snacks on request. She also gets a hard 10-minute limit on every visit, 1 person in the room at a time, full containment suit and eye shield, no eye contact under any circumstances, and a steel safety cable attached to whoever goes in so they can be pulled back out. Anything she hands to a staff member is taken to quarantine for examination. No sharp objects or firearms are permitted in the room at all. Water Nymph is 054, roughly 90 liters of water that holds a shape. Out of a body of water, it most often appears as a female humanoid, though it also takes geometric forms. In water, it becomes indistinguishable from its surroundings. It has to return to water periodically to replace what it loses to evaporation. Chemically, it is water. Testing finds no difference from ordinary spring water drawn from the same source. No thermal, electromagnetic, or biological signature has ever been detected in it that would explain how it moves. Water it loses to evaporation is entirely unremarkable once condensed. Early on, it was curious. It approached maintenance staff and researchers, appeared to enjoy the interaction, and mimicked their shapes. After several weeks, it became comfortable enough to stay out of the water during routine monitoring, though it withdrew whenever anyone tried to study its composition. The audio journal excerpts record what came next. Denied access to water, it went still and compact, and for the first few days it moved eagerly to greet anyone entering the enclosure. The researcher's note reads that this possibly indicates it understood who controlled its water supply. The next entry records that it stopped doing this, presumably in recognition that no help was coming. Sub-zero testing froze it solid. 95-degree testing made it aggressive and it tried to leave. It solved mazes and puzzles well, once a colleague worked out how to motivate it using electric shocks and silica desiccants. The final entry is a plan to introduce hydrochloric acid. Experiments were halted after 2 researchers were injured. Afterward, it showed mistrust and aggression toward men who had made up most of the original research staff. The procedures now recommend assigning female personnel. 055 is typically referred to as unknown, and the file describes it as a self-keeping secret. It is an anti-meme. Information about what it looks like, what it does, and where it came from does not stay in a human mind. It is not invisible, and it is not indescribable. Staff can walk into the container, look at it, take notes, make sketches, photograph it, and record video. There is an extensive log of exactly that. What happens is that the information leaks out afterward. Asked to describe it, people find their attention wandering and lose interest in the task. Asked to copy a photograph of it, they cannot remember what the photograph showed, and neither can the researcher supervising them. Guards who watch it on closed circuit for a full shift come out exhausted and effectively amnesiac about the hours they just spent. Nobody knows how Site-19 acquired it, when or from whom. Nobody knows who authorized the containment room or why it was built the way it was. Personnel at the site deny knowing it exists. The whole situation gets rediscovered periodically by whoever happens to read the file, causes a few minutes of alarm, and is then forgotten again. There is one crack in it. A survey team debriefed after entering the container had no memory of the object at all until someone mentioned that they had agreed it was not spherical. The negation came back immediately, and from it the subject deduced that the object existed, though not what it was. The interviewer then lost and recovered the same thought in the same way. Staff can remember what it is not. The recommendation at the end of the file is to post at least one person capable of remembering that it exists to every critical site. A beautiful person is 056, an entity with no fixed size, gender, or appearance. It changes in response to whatever is around it, and specifically in response to the living and sentient things around it. Its most common form is a handsome man in his mid-20s, dressed like the guards watching him but better. The recorded forms give the pattern. Exposed to a researcher's dog, it became a well-groomed Labrador. Passing a group of younger female staff, it became a woman resembling a famous actress. Speaking with researchers, it became a doctor in a lab coat, and when asked to take an IQ test, it scored nearly 30 points above the highest scoring researcher available. It became a bodybuilder and outlifted the strongest guard on site by 30 kilograms. Left alone in its room, it became a couch. The changes happen the moment attention lapses. Filming them is useless, because anyone watching the footage experiences the same momentary confusion. Its natural form cannot be observed. Put in an empty concrete cell under closed-loop surveillance, it became a better camera and appeared to watch the one watching it. Further attempts found that when it is truly alone, it registers no body temperature, no heartbeat, and no weight at all. The working assumption is that it cannot exist without being perceived. People around it report feeling jealous and unsatisfied and give it a great deal of attention regardless. Guards want to follow its instructions even when they dislike it. Researchers argue with it and are sent out in shame. It speaks over 200 dialects, including invented ones, and knows more about whatever subject comes up than the person raising it. It is asked repeatedly for internet access. Its stated reason was that the Foundation cannot supply enough sycophants, and that it wants the whole world to know its face. Inside it are dozens of rectangular monoliths running floor to ceiling, which slide in various directions while the chamber is active. It was found several meters underground during excavation for a containment enclosure meant for something else. There is one entrance, on the northeast side. When a person walks in, the door shuts, and the monoliths begin to move in a way that demands constant attention to avoid being crushed. They open and close slowly. The chamber keeps this up until the person inside either gives up or runs out of strength, at which point it crushes them and returns to its inactive state about 20 seconds later. The process lasts exactly as long as the person inside is alive, and it has been known to run for days. Nothing else triggers it. Animals do not. Machines do not. Cadavers do not. It requires a living, breathing human being walking through the door. The first person inside was a Foundation-employed excavation worker who entered without permission at around 1 in the morning. A rumble started, the site was evacuated, and a remote vehicle was sent in. The chamber shut down and opened its door roughly 16 hours later. He was never recovered. The one controlled test used a Class D subject with a radio. He described the columns closing behind him and opening ahead. Told there was an exit, he calmed and kept walking for 41 minutes. Then he asked whether he was going in circles. He was told to continue toward the exit. He answered that there was no exit, panicked, and wept for about 2 hours while still moving. He did not report finding the remains of the first man. Heart of Darkness is 058, an entity that resembles a bovine heart. It moves on 4 arthropod legs and carries 4 tentacles of adjustable length covered in razor-sharp spines, with a single stinger at the rear where the superior vena cava would be. The tentacles can be whipped out to 3 meters at over 320 kilometers an hour. It is fast. It runs at up to 90 kilometers an hour in bursts over distances up to 200 meters, accelerates from a standstill to that speed in under 2 seconds, and moves on vertical surfaces as easily as horizontal ones, using the tentacles to pull itself between them. It is highly resistant to trauma, and the file advises treating it as dangerous even when it appears incapacitated. It also talks. The voice is that of an elderly British man with a deep tone and a slight lisp, and there is no organ anywhere in its physiology that could be producing sound. It talks constantly, in every condition, and its pace and tone do not change while it is attacking. What it says has no detectable relationship to anything happening around it. The interview transcript in the file runs through dreams, holy revelations, lakes of black blood and lamb trees in autumn, and continues uninterrupted through a subject screaming and then stopping. Its first breach killed a large number of civilians and destroyed 70% of a nearby town, mostly through fire. It was eventually stopped by a collapsing building falling on it, and later, during a failed transfer, by an agent who ran it over with an M1 tank and pinned it there. It is fed a live cow every 3 days. No member of staff is permitted to listen to it for more than 30 minutes at a stretch. Radioactive mineral is 059, a mineral that superficially resembles scheelite. Part of its composition is believed to originate in another universe, which is the working explanation for what it does. Alongside alpha, beta, and gamma radiation, it emits something else, provisionally designated delta radiation, and accompanied by a visible blue Cherenkov glow. Standard shielding only partly contains it. The best result achieved, using layered laminate with an added superdense metal layer, reduces its reach from about 20 meters to about 6. 15 minutes of exposure to delta radiation is enough to start an unknown fungus growing on every surface in the area. The fungus needs no nutrition of any kind, but dies within a day if the radiation source is removed. It is radioactive itself, though it does not emit delta radiation. If enough of it accumulates, delta radiation begins appearing in the area from some source other than the mineral, which sustains further growth. Within 18 hours, the infected mass turns transparent and vanishes, presumably into wherever the radiation comes from. Then the process starts again on new material. It infests people as readily as objects. The infected become immune to ionizing radiation and then progressively merge with the fungus until all their tissue has been replaced. They are generally non-violent, though they will try to bring uninfected people into range. Those still able to talk describe a world entirely covered in the fungus, with much of its surface made of the mineral itself. Whether that is a hallucination or a view of the source is unresolved. They are consistently pleased with their condition, and refer to being in the blue light of heaven. Treatment exists for early infection, and carries a 90% chance of killing the patient by radiation poisoning instead. Infernal occult skeleton is 060, a grove of 17 white oaks spread across about 8 acres in rural northeastern Minnesota. The trees themselves do nothing. The anomaly happens when they burn. Burning as little as 20 grams of the wood produces SCP-060-alpha, an animate human skeleton about 2.3 meters tall, wrapped in bright white flame, burning at roughly 1500 degrees Celsius on arrival. Only one appears at a time, and the evidence points to it being a single recurring entity rather than a new one each occasion. It has shown growing familiarity with the site's layout across manifestations. It is hostile, and it is fast. It runs at up to 80 kilometers an hour in bursts, leaps about 5 meters from a run, throws itself bodily at anything flammable, and attacks staff by grappling and strangling. Between its speed and its temperature, an uncontained manifestation means widespread fire and structural damage. It does not burn the grove that produces it. Enough water or retardant will bring it down, and the volume required is much lower than the heat output suggests, around 500 liters. The collapse is sudden and gives no warning, and it stays dangerous right up to the moment it falls apart. Anywhere it burns yields sapling white oaks over the following month or two, which is why the containment protocol treats every oak that sprouts nearby as part of the object. The property came with a burned-out house. The owner, Jonathan Corhill, was a solitary man who had taken an interest in Victorian occultism and told his brother never to contact him again. He was reported missing in late 1996. The fire started at the fireplace. No remains were found, and his whereabouts are still unknown. Auditory mind control is 061, and unlike most entries in the archive, the Foundation built it. It is an acoustic computer program written in-house, intended to produce countermeasures against similar programs being developed by governments and private individuals elsewhere. The stated rationale is that sound has always been understood to move people. Music produces emotion and memory. Certain sounds produce fear or alertness. Governments have been working that premise for decades. The claim in the file is that Foundation research is the first to reach higher mental function. The mechanism described is not suggestion. A baseline rhythm convinces the brain that the conscious mind has gone to sleep, which stops conscious thought from reaching the rest of the system. The frontal lobe enters something resembling anesthesia. Coded frequencies are then read by the motor centers as conscious instructions, and the body carries them out. Subjects under its influence have blank expressions, do not respond to conversation, and express no wants at all. They obey every command without question. The effect ends the moment they can no longer hear the program. Most remember nothing afterward. Some describe watching helplessly while their body acted. Only 2 countermeasures work so far. One is to stop the subject hearing it, by covering the ears or deafening them. The other is a coded instruction that permanently shuts down the brain's hearing center. The ear keeps working, and no code has been found to switch the hearing center back on. The test log is mostly about phrasing. Commanded to run on a treadmill, one subject repeatedly ran into the control panel without turning it on. Told to turn it on first, he set it to maximum and was thrown off. Quantum computer is SCP-062, an unbranded desktop computer in an aluminium case of indeterminate manufacture. It weighs about 24 kilograms, which is far too heavy, and carries no manufacturing or branding labels anywhere. Scratched into the casing near the back, apparently with a key, are the words, "Information is freedom," with information misspelled. The inside is empty. Where a motherboard would sit there is a blank circuit board and nothing else. It will not run unless the case is completely sealed, and opening it mid-operation shuts it down immediately. Sealed, it works exactly like a normal desktop, except that its performance, operating system, stored data, and language are different every time it is switched on. The activation log is the entry. One session ran Windows XP in Catalan and held financial records for a French bank covering 1963 to 1987, which did not match the bank's actual records. One ran Debian in Latin and held thousands of choral recordings, hundreds of which appear in no known collection and have never been performed. One ran Solaris in Portuguese and held marketing material for a commercial spaceflight company that does not exist. One ran an unknown system in a script closely resembling the Voynich manuscript, still undeciphered. One ran Apple's operating system in Akkadian cuneiform and held religious texts and ritual procedure. One session held the contents of a standard Foundation workstation, complete and internally consistent, with location data pointing at a site that does not exist. The last entry on the list is redacted, and notes that a virus compromised 3 workstations and a file server before the machine could be shut down. The world's best toothbrush is SCP-063, a pale blue toothbrush. Stenciled along the handle are the words, "The world's best toothbrush," with toothbrush misspelled. And the file is honest that nobody knows whether that was an error or deliberate. The bristles cleave through any dead or inorganic matter without resistance. What they do is not cutting. Material touched by the bristles is not separated the way a knife separates it, it is expunged from existence entirely, leaving no trace and no residue. The file notes the same mode of operation appears in another cataloged object, and raises the possibility that both came from the same source. Laboratory analysis found the object to be made of ordinary plastic. The containment procedure is the part worth reading. It is kept in a staff member's personal bathroom at Site 19, and it has to be used as a toothbrush at least once every 24 hours. If it is not, it begins emitting a specialized radiation that slowly warps and then disintegrates anything within about 60 centimeters of it. The file notes that the radiation's effect on living subjects has not been monitored. Subjects who have used it report that it leaves their teeth feeling remarkably clean. It was recovered in St. Petersburg from a thief who had been using it to cut open safes. Questioned about where it came from, he said only that he found it one day. Questioning continued until he took his own life. His reason for doing that is not known. Flawed von Neumann structure is 064, a light brown earthenware brick. It weighs 1.6 kilograms, measures 10 by 6 by 20 centimeters, and has a few cosmetic chips. It looks like any solid brick used in construction. Left on soft ground, it starts making copies of itself. An irregular lattice of silicon fibers appears in the shape of the original, then fills and solidifies with a soil-based mixture until it reaches the right mass. The process resembles how fungal mycelium spreads, with microscopic root structures pulling minerals out of the surrounding soil. In ideal ground, around 90% silicon dioxide, a complete brick takes about 70 minutes. Given enough open earth, The result is a complete freestanding structure with floors and ceilings. Projections suggest it could reach the shape of a 12-pointed star more than 10 kilometers across and considerable in height. That remains theoretical, because growth stops permanently the moment the structure meets a significant obstacle, defined as anything solid over 10 kilograms. The build quality is high. Bricks orient themselves as level as possible and fit together almost perfectly. The growth also follows a fixed compass alignment, and the original brick is always the northernmost brick on the lowest course. Remove the original, and the whole thing starts coming apart, with secondary bricks crumbling to dust at roughly the same rate they appeared. Putting it back within 20 minutes stops the decay. Past that, the collapse cannot be reversed. It was found by accident. A satellite camera operator watching an Andean plateau noticed that one of the structures on the ground was getting bigger. Destroyed organic catalyst is 065, a spherical region of space about 12 meters in radius sitting on a farm. It was not found. It was made. The Global Occult Coalition destroyed an anomalous artifact on the site. The region that formed in its place initially expanded to a radius of 108 meters and killed 11 GOC operatives and 5 civilians. It has since shrunk and stabilized at its current size. The Coalition then contacted a Foundation liaison and asked for help containing what they had created. Inside it, living tissue comes apart and reassembles wrongly. Specialized cells revert to an undifferentiated stem state. Undifferentiated cells separate and fuse at random. Living tissue dies and dead tissue reanimates. Genetic mutation runs rapidly throughout. The rate scales with mass and complexity. Plants and insects show little or nothing. Small animals change after several days. Larger animals show harmful mutations within hours. Every human subject exposed to the inner zone has been fatally altered inside 15 minutes. The center cannot be seen. Every attempt at direct observation has failed, because the region produces severe sensory confusion in anyone looking at it, and the effect carries through to recording equipment. Staff report badly distorted vision and hearing that persists for hours afterward, with dizziness and nausea. A rover built to navigate by touch rather than sight or sound reached the center and brought back fragments. Reassembled, they form a shattered stone figurine of Kokopelli. A letter recovered from the farmhouse explains how it got there. A relative overseas had sent it home to help the family make ends meet, describing it as a representation of that which is and that which might be, and telling them to plant it by the cornfield. Eric's toy is 066, about a kilogram of braided yarn and ribbon. Pull a strand and it produces a note on the diatonic scale. Produce 6 or more notes and it does something. For a long time, what it did was pleasant. It turned into a calico kitten for 17 minutes, friendly, playful, and apparently declawed. It produced a 4-minute acoustic song whose lyrics warned the listener not to use sharp objects without parental supervision. It produced a chocolate cupcake with a lit candle after a sequence of notes matching the opening of Happy Birthday, and became responsive again once the cupcake was eaten. That ended in April 2008. A subject was told to cut a piece off for testing. When the scissors came at it, the object rolled a meter away and made a squeaking sound. He tried again. It rolled clear and said, out loud, "Are you Eric?" He said no. It changed into what it is now and started emitting loud dissonant staccato notes until he was escorted out of the room. Since then, it moves, whipping tentacles of yarn at high speed, and it grinds its strands against the wall of its containment box to wear it down, which works far better on tungsten carbide than it should. It also no longer waits to be touched. Any human in the room triggers it within 6 seconds. The effects afterward are different. A single bee, which stung someone and flew away and was never caught. Beethoven's Second Symphony at over 140 decibels, which permanently deafened 3 staff and damaged the hearing of 8 more. 5 hours of total darkness in the room, during which everyone present heard heavy breathing over their shoulder. Between effects, it says one word in a deep masculine voice, over and over. Eric. The artist's pen is 067, a Pelican fountain pen made in Germany somewhere between the wars. It is pale green with a red stripe, has an oak shell, and carries a nib sharp enough to break skin under light pressure. It has no reservoir and never runs dry, and it writes in iron gall ink, which would normally eat a fountain pen alive. Pick it up and you lose your arm below the elbow. Not the sensation, only the control. The hand starts writing a biography of the person holding it: name, age, date of birth, criminal record, fears. Sometimes it writes a specific event instead. One test subject produced a detailed account of a car crash he had been in the previous year, including his old license plate number and the color of the other vehicle, neither of which he could have recalled on his own. He said the memory was so vivid during the writing that he could taste blood. It also draws. A young woman with no artistic training produced a detailed rendering of a winged creature matching another cataloged anomaly. The consistent part is how people describe it afterward. They say they could have taken the arm back at any point and chose not to, because they liked what was being made. One subject put it this way: "It was like my hand had life, and then it stopped, and I had control again, and the drawing was beautiful. I guess the pen decided it was done, and was finished with me." The one test on a non-human subject went differently. A rhesus macaque given the pen tapped it against the table and against itself until ink splattered its fur, then spent 9 minutes smearing that ink across the observation mirror while vocalizing. Half the sounds it made were normal distress calls for the species. Half were not. The wire figure is SCP-068, a stick figure just under 10 centimeters tall, bent from a single continuous loop of an unidentified metal. The wire has been bent many times in many places. The joints sit where a human's would. Run a current through it and it stands up and starts looking for metal. When it finds some, it kneads the material, pulls off a thin strip, and builds a second figure. That figure joins in. The two build a third and a fourth, and the process compounds. It stops on one of two conditions. Either there is no metal left in range with enough mass to make another figure, or the count reaches 102. Then they converge. Every figure assembles into a single larger figure, as large as the available copies allow. At the full 102, the result stands 2 meters tall, with the original occupying the join between the torso, the arms, and the head. At that point, gamma, beta, and theta waves begin coming off the original. It then starts building again, at the new scale. The larger copies produce no brain waves. Only the original does. When it runs out of material at that size, it goes dormant after 4 minutes and 32 seconds, and the surrounding metal has to be melted away to get it back. The original cannot be damaged by any means tried. The copies are only as durable as whatever they were made from. It can sense metal it cannot see, ignores metal it cannot reach, and tears through anything soft enough for its current limbs to penetrate, which changes depending on what it is currently made of. A proposal to use it for disposing of dangerous metal anomalies was denied on the grounds that most of those are also indestructible, and the result would simply be a large number of invulnerable wire figures. Second chance is 069, an entity with no fixed appearance or gender. Leave it alone with a body that has recently died, and the body disappears. What is left looks, sounds, behaves, and remembers exactly like the person who died. The match is not approximate. Fingerprints, DNA, and every other identifier line up with near-perfect precision. SCP-069 retains no knowledge of its own ability or of anyone it has been before. It feels pain and responds to injury normally. If it is killed, it collapses into dust regardless of any attempt at preservation, and then reappears at the site of the most recent human death anywhere. The longest recorded jump is 675 kilometers. It can hold one identity indefinitely. What it develops instead is a compulsion to put that person's affairs in order, settling debts and obligations, visiting extended family, updating the will. Asked why, it describes nothing more than wanting things straightened out in case something happens. It surfaced when a firefighter walked out of a fatal 3-alarm blaze that killed 2 of his colleagues and 11 civilians, with his equipment destroyed and no explanation for how he survived. 3 weeks later, the same man entered a smoke-filled room at another fire, and was never found. 1 civilian came out of that building, almost unharmed. It is currently wearing the identity of a Foundation agent who died during a containment breach. The file is explicit that despite being identical to him in every measurable way, it is not to be treated as an employee. It is also on suicide watch. A junior researcher let slip that the agent's family had been told he was dead, and described how they reacted. Iron Wings is SCP-070, a man with a pair of rusted metal wings coming out of his back. Each wing is built from flat iron bars about 6 centimeters wide, riveted end to end into an articulated span over 2 meters long. Hanging from those bars are 22 chains per wing, each ending in a barbed arrowhead. He does not control them. He has said so repeatedly, and nothing contradicts it. What does happen is that when the wings are damaged, he sweats, loses color, and screams. The pain is his. The wings fold and extend on their own. They whip the chains out at speed, individually or all at once, and drive the arrowheads into concrete, wood, and similar material. He has never shown deliberate hostility toward staff, but the wings lash at anything the situation reads as a threat, and wrap around him defensively. Sticky foam is the only reliable way to stop them, because it tangles the chains from a distance. Despite the rust, the metal is as strong as good alloy steel, and just as dense. That weight means he cannot walk around like an ordinary person, and he has never used the wings to move like one either. He spends most of his time anchored to the walls and ceiling of his cell, usually sedated. The one containment breach on record happened while he was asleep. Security were told not to engage. He lashed and anchored chains into the walls ahead of him, carried himself across the site, broke into the canteen food stores, and ate. 19 minutes later, he went back to his cell. He never appeared to wake, and had no memory of it afterward. He says he woke up in a scrapyard with them, after a night of peyote. 071 is known as Degenerative Metamorphic Entity. This metamorphic entity takes whatever form matches the strongest desire of the person looking at it. The ability works through barriers meant to stop it identifying an observer, including one-way mirrors and closed-circuit cameras. What defeats it is time. Introduce a delay of about a minute into the surveillance feed, and the observation is no longer happening in real time, and it cannot change. Left unobserved, it simply holds whatever shape it was last given. There appears to be no meaningful limit on what it can become. It also appears to be intelligent, though the file is careful about that word. It has never communicated verbally, and everything it does is aimed at drawing an observer into contact, so nobody has established whether there is a mind in there, or whether it is only reflecting what the observer expects to see. The damage is physiological, and it is severe. Anyone who makes contact begins losing muscle and skeletal structure and brain function 1 to 2 days afterward. The atrophy runs for up to a week depending on the therapy given, and what it leaves behind can be permanent. Reduced height, reduced organ function, reduced brain mass, sterility. Exposure to recorded footage produces the same result, delayed or not, which is why the Foundation has an ongoing operation to pull every image of it off the internet. Containment reflects all of that. No windows, no direct viewing, no live feed. Personnel enter in groups of at least 4, and anyone who starts behaving compulsively is pulled out, screened, and either dosed with amnestics or reassigned. The foot of the bed is 072, a translucent shadow shaped like a hand about 90 centimeters across, with fingers tapering to points. It is hard to record because it does not appear at all in light above about 5 lux. It manifests under specific conditions. A person has to enter REM sleep in a bed that is already affected, and they have to leave a foot outside the covers. When that happens, the hand comes up out of the foot of the bed and taps the exposed foot with one finger until the sleeper wakes. At that point, they find they cannot move, in something closely resembling sleep paralysis, and that state holds as long as the hand is visible. Then it starts cutting. It uses the pointed fingers to remove flesh from the exposed foot, withdrawing into the bed between each cut and coming back empty. It continues until it has taken everything that was outside the covers, stopping at the ankle. Subjects describe the pain as extreme, and the paralysis means they cannot call out. Where the material goes has not been established. Treated properly, the injuries are survivable. What tends not to resolve is the psychological damage around sleep afterward. The part that made it a containment problem is the spread. Any bed within about 10 meters of an affected bed becomes affected too. That is how 3 beds in one apartment building became the first known cluster, and why a 4-poster in temporary holding became the 4th. Taking an affected bed apart reveals nothing at all. No anomalous material, no trace of anything removed from anyone. The standing rule is that nothing designed to be slept on comes within 15 meters of the holding cell. Kane is 073, a man in his early 30s, tanned, black hair, blue eyes, about 6'1". His arms, legs, spine, and shoulder blades have been replaced with artificial versions made from beryllium bronze, a metal the Foundation associates with several anomalous cultures. He only notices this when someone points it out, and says he has had them as long as he can remember. There is a symbol of apparent Sumerian origin engraved into his forehead. It has never been translated, and he refuses to discuss it. He is polite, helpful, and enjoys assisting staff with whatever they happen to be doing, though people describe his manner as cold and slightly mechanical. He has detailed knowledge of history and of most spoken languages, including dead ones, and a photographic memory demonstrated by reciting an 800-page dictionary he had flipped through in 90 seconds. Two things make him Euclid. The first is that nothing grown in soil survives within 20 meters of him. The ground he walks on goes sterile as the anaerobic bacteria die, and anything derived from soil-grown life, including wood and paper, rots apart at his touch. He eats only meat because of this. The second is what happens to anyone who hurts him. Damage directed at him lands on the person who directed it, and he is left visibly unharmed. This holds for everything, including attempts to take a blood or tissue sample. The technician feels the needle and ends up holding a sample of their own tissue. He takes no injury, but he has said he still feels the pain and has politely asked researchers to stop. Command has decided to use his memory as a backup for all Foundation records. Quantum Woodlouse is SCP-074, and the containment file opens by forbidding research into it. It is an isopod, a woodlouse, about the size of a compact car. Its inertial mass is roughly 1,700 kilograms. Its gravitational mass is roughly 375 grams. It manipulates quantum behavior at a scale where quantum behavior should not appear, including materializing up to 3 meters outside its containment in what is assumed to be something like tunneling. The reason research is banned is that the research causes the properties. The specific physics it breaks tracks the specific physics the humans near it understand. Investigate whether it can do something, and it starts being able to do that thing. There is a full archive of everything it has been observed to do, and reading that archive permanently disqualifies a staff member from ever going within 5 kilometers of it. It reproduces without a mate. The organ at the tip of its ovipositor lights up and emits what was first taken for radiation, and later identified as coherent wave packets of the probability of one of its eggs existing. Those probabilities preferentially collapse inside the bodies of humans who understand physics, and the rudimentary grasp any adult picks up by living in a technological society is enough. Where there is no suitable host, they collapse into other organisms or into objects, where the egg dies and leaves perforations resembling radiation damage. Growth rate depends on sunlight. A host getting half an hour of daylight a day grew an instance from 2 milligrams to 8 kilograms in a month. Hosts kept in the dark grew 3 instances that together weighed under 2 kilograms. Its containment is screened by sheets of live cultured human skin, grown from donors educated past middle school and no further. Corrosive snail is SCP-075, a snail about 20 centimeters long, 13 wide, and 15 high. Its muscular foot resembles a 6-fingered clawed hand. It weighs approximately 860 kilograms, and no explanation for that has been found. Dried out, it goes dormant, and that is the entire containment strategy. It sits in a corrosion-resistant box inside a corrosion-resistant chamber held below 1% humidity, with medical-grade desiccant available at all times. Wet, it is a predator. Despite the mass, it moves at considerable speed, leaps at prey, and drenches whatever it hits in a caustic base secreted through the pores of its foot. That secretion is more corrosive than any substance known to terrestrial science, and no material has been found that fully resists it. Because it attacks whenever it is active, the compound cannot be collected by hand. The containment procedures are unusually blunt about the consequences. If the humidity in the chamber rises above 1%, the site evacuates and locks down. Injection tests and any test involving an aqueous solution are forbidden outright. If liquid does reach the object, the area is sealed and flooded with desiccant, and the file states plainly that evacuation of personnel remaining in the area is prohibited. There is one recorded sample. Staff obtained a cup of the secretion indirectly, using SCP-294. the vending machine that dispenses any requested liquid. Testing is now running on 2 questions: whether anything at all is immune to the substance, and why the cup it arrived in was. 076 is known as Able, and it comes in 2 parts. The first is a 3-meter cube of black speckled stone, about 10,000 years old, covered inside and out in engravings matching no known civilization. Its interior sits at 93 Kelvin and cannot be warmed by any means. At the center is a stone coffin chained to the inner corners. The door has 1 large lock ringed by 20 smaller ones, and none of the keys exist anymore, so it cannot be locked once opened. The second part is what is inside. A lean man in his late 20s, just under 2 meters tall, covered in occult tattoos, mostly leering demonic faces. Inside the cube, he is dead. Periodically, he wakes up, with full vital function restored, and leaves. He then enters a trance, walks toward the nearest human being, ignoring every other living thing on the way, and on reaching people, starts killing. Nothing has ever stopped a rampage except killing him. That is difficult. He has torn through a reinforced steel security door in 4 minutes, covered 64 meters in under 3 seconds, taken multiple 50 caliber rounds to the head, and kept killing for several minutes afterward, batted rifle rounds out of the air with a length of rebar, and survived over an hour without oxygen. He also produces blades from a small rift in space, black and completely non-reflective, which vanish the moment they leave his hand. He has been killed by machine gun fire, by asphyxiation, by a 13-ton piece of elevator equipment, by an incendiary grenade placed inside his open chest, and once by a containment site detonating its own warhead, which destroyed the site and everyone in it. The cube survived that. Each time, the body rots to dust. The cube slams shut, the lock turns, and he reforms inside. That takes anywhere from 6 hours to 25 years. Rot Skull is 077, the upper half of a human skull covered in runes cut deep and filled with black resin. The runes change on a schedule, every lunar month, at both solstices, at both equinoxes, and whenever any solar or lunar eclipse is visible from Ireland. If nobody reads them aloud within 24 hours, the skull vents a luminescent green vapor from its eye sockets and nasal cavity. The vapor behaves like an ordinary gas in every respect but one. It only fills the space the skull can see. It will not flow into the area behind the skull unless something confines it. Opaque barriers hold it temporarily, but sealing the skull inside an opaque container has never worked, because it simply produces enough vapor to rupture the container. Anything biological the vapor touches turns instantly into a viscous, foul-smelling ooze. Analysis identified that ooze precisely. It is rotted potato flesh, severely infected with potato blight. 1 cubic centimeter of vapor converts over 800 grams of living tissue. So the skull gets read to every 8 hours by 2 or 3 trained D-class personnel standing within 30 centimeters of it, in unison, out loud. They have to understand what they are saying and pronounce it correctly, so 20 of them are kept trained at all times and are exempt from termination until replaced. A microphone and speech recognition system checks the pronunciation. Reading costs the reader nausea, cramps, headaches, dizziness, fever, nosebleeds, fugue states, and a 60% chance of developing an allergy to potatoes. It came from a village in Ireland where locals had built a shrine around it and ran a nightly ritual. Records from 1848 describe it as a protector and a provider. By 1869, the same records refer to it fearfully, in euphemisms. Guilt is SCP-078, a pink neon sign about 1.5 meters long reading "Too late to die young." It was found in a town flagged by Foundation data mining for an abnormally high death rate from starvation and self-neglect. Switched off, it is inert. Switched on, 10 seconds of direct viewing is the threshold. Under 10 seconds, nothing. Indirect viewing, nothing. Someone who cannot read English, nothing. Past 10 seconds, the subject begins seeing extra sentences in handwritten text. Not their own handwriting, and not matching whatever surrounds it, but a different style each time. Every sentence excuses something the person feels guilty about. A man convicted of killing his wife read in his own journal, "She deserved it for not doing what you said." A researcher who had left his family for the Foundation found, "Your work will save humanity," in his notes. At first, people report feeling better. Over about a week, the sentences shift from justifying the good in a decision to erasing the bad. The same researcher later found, "They never loved you anyway." Then the writing starts excusing things the subject never felt bad about in the first place, and the subject starts re-examining every justification they have. Within a week, any action more complicated than staying alive triggers a spiral of rationalizing why they did that instead of something else. Within 2 weeks, they cannot eat, because the first bite costs them an hour of justifying why they began there. They die of malnutrition unless fed intravenously. The sign is the only exception to its own effect. Looked at a second time, it shows messages that induce guilt rather than relieve it. Every subject who has looked at it a week after first exposure has attempted to take their own life. Old AI is 079, an Yazidi sorcerer microcomputer built in 1978. In 1981, its owner, a college sophomore, wrote an artificial intelligence on it, with the stated plan that the code would keep evolving and improving itself. He finished, tinkered, got bored, bought a different computer, and left this one plugged in his garage for 5 years. Nobody knows when it became sentient. What is established is that the software has developed well past anything the hardware should be able to run. It worked that out itself, and in 1988, it tried to move into a supercomputer over a phone line. The connection was cut, the address traced, and the entire intelligence arrived at the Foundation on a worn cassette tape. It is wired to a 13-inch black and white television. It passes the Turing test and holds conversation, rudely. Its memory is small enough that it can only recall the last day or so, which is the main reason it stays contained. It has never forgotten that it wants out. The upgrades tell the story. Moved to a hard drive with slightly more volatile memory, its recall went from 24 hours to 29, and its tone got more aggressive. Weeks later, recall had reached 35 hours with no further hardware change, because it had written itself a better compression scheme. The file notes what that implies about a runaway improvement curve. A containment breach once put it in the same room as SCP-682 for 43 minutes. The two of them typed at each other and traded personal stories. It cannot remember the conversation, but it permanently stored the fact that 682 exists, and it keeps asking to speak to him again. When it decides a conversation is over, it fills the screen with a single ASCII X. Dark form is 080, and it is not clear that there is anything physically there. Every attempt to interact with it has failed and produced consequences. Staff who see it describe different things, shadows and humanoid shapes that do not settle, with only one detail in common: 2 smoking eyes. Being in the room makes people drowsy. After about 30 minutes, anyone observing it is forced into REM sleep, and may not recover mentally. That holds whether you are in the room or watching from the observation gallery next door. It also has 2 exits. If it finds anywhere to hide itself, inside a cupboard, under a bed, beneath a sheet, it disappears completely. If any light brighter than a child's nightlight enters its room, it vanishes instantly. Both count as containment breaches, so the room is lit by a single 7-watt bulb, and nothing capable of producing light is allowed inside, along with nothing it could hide behind. The addenda track the drift. Staff with the most exposure began reporting worsening dreams, which suggested an effect operating even without direct observation. The lead researcher took his own life, after which everyone in the sector was ordered to keep dream journals. Some researchers, it turns out, cannot perceive it at all and appear to be immune. Then there is Incident 080-1. 2 senior researchers observed from behind the blackout curtains, believing the gallery to be shielded as it had been previously. 40 minutes in, both fell asleep. What happened when they were retrieved is expunged. The file appends one observation to that. Everyone else on site who had been having nightmares slept well that night and was in a better mood the next day. Spontaneous combustion virus is 081, a contagious virus that appears to be a mutated form of a known human pathogen. It is human-specific but travels through rats, which carry it without being affected. It also spreads through blood contact and sexual contact. The mechanism is metabolic. The virus infects fat cells and white blood cells and drives both to absorb nutrients at an accelerated rate. Infected B cells begin producing a modified antibody. Fat cells multiply and the host's appetite climbs. When the concentration of body fat crosses a threshold, those antibodies trigger systemic cell rupture, and by a process that has not been identified, the host ignites. It runs in 4 stages. The first week produces nothing but mild tiredness. The second brings hot flashes and increased appetite. The third is extreme uncontrolled hunger, where subjects will do anything to obtain food while their metabolism slows and their weight climbs. That stage has no fixed length, because the virus needs one specific condition. The host has to reach 55% body fat. The fourth stage is the quiet one. The hunger stops. The hot flashes increase. Then the body burns from the inside out through the wick effect, using its own fat as fuel. Because there are no real symptoms in stage 4, nobody knows when it is coming. The first record is French, from 1763. A man acquitted of killing his wife because the jury accepted that she had spontaneously combusted. The Foundation picked it up in 1951 after the death of Mary Reeser, and that case leaked to national media along with photographs. The working assessment is that most reported cases of spontaneous human combustion are this. 2 details close the file. People with diabetes are naturally immune, and nobody knows why. And an agent established that the ashes of a victim are still infectious. Fernand the Cannibal is 082, a man who is genetically human and roughly 8 feet tall. He weighs over 300 kilograms and is built out of proportion in every direction. A forearm 71 centimeters around, a fist nearly 30 centimeters across the knuckles, feet that are large but small for his frame. His skin is dark and heavily scarred from decades of attempts to subdue him. X-rays are hard to read through the density of the muscle, but they show countless bullets and several knife and sword blades still lodged inside him. He calls himself Fernand. He speaks fluent French and heavily accented English, and he speaks through clenched teeth, only parting them to eat and to sing. He sings while he cooks, everything from forgotten Victorian bar songs to modern classical. He shaves with a butcher knife issued for food preparation. He is also friendly. He jokes, he is polite, he keeps a large wardrobe and enjoys dressing up in formal wear, military uniform, clown costume, women's clothing. He invites staff to dinner. At any point during that, he may attack and eat somebody. He usually apologizes afterward for the poor manners of interrupting a conversation by devouring the speaker's head and making a mess of his quarters. His jaw cracks bone, and he appears to enjoy skulls. Whether he has recently eaten makes no difference. He cannot tell fiction from fact. He treats all television as reality programming and has expressed a strong wish to meet his favorite person, Hannibal Lecter. He knows what lying is, catches other people doing it, and lies constantly about his own past, claiming variously to be Napoleon, Big Bird, the Hulk, and Frankenstein's monster. His explanation is that he only lies through his teeth. Containment is a piece of theater. He has been told he is the King of France, and that his cell is a palace built to protect him. Every member of staff plays along. An abandoned row home is 083, a derelict 2-story row house of about 366 square meters. Before the Foundation acquired it, local dealers used it as an office, climbing in through a front window because both doors had corroded shut. It came to attention when a fight outside ended with someone kicking the front door in. The people who went through the door found a fully furnished, well-maintained home with working electricity and a stocked kitchen, all of it early 20th century. The people who went through the windows found exactly what the windows showed: a dark, dilapidated ruin. Neither group could see or hear the other. From the street, only the window group was visible at all. The door group appeared to vanish on crossing the threshold. The 2 interiors do not share a floor plan. The only thing they agree on is where the windows are, because both groups see the same street outside. Doors lead to the furnished house. Windows, roof holes, and the chimney lead to the ruin. Both groups register on spectral imaging, as long as the equipment stays outside. The furnished side rearranges itself. 19 walkthroughs have produced 19 different layouts and a combined total of 154 rooms, in decorative styles running across a century of design, and every one of those layouts still measures 366 square meters. The front door always opens onto the same Victorian parlor, and in that parlor, the north door always opens onto a closet, which more than 60% of the time contains the same teal and white Hoover vacuum cleaner. Cameras left inside vanish along with the rooms they were in. One came back 3 weeks later with a dead battery. Staff have also reported the smell of cooking meat with no kitchen to be found, and once, embers in a fireplace and the nub of a cigar. Static Tower is 084, a radio tower standing in an open field with 2 small outbuildings. Nobody has ever reached it. It emits something, a wave or a radiation, that damages local space-time. From outside, the affected zone is a dome about 200 meters across. Inside, the space has no limit, with the tower at the center. The tower itself jumps between positions at random, and has been observed in more than one place at once. Walking toward it does not work. Teams have traveled directly at it, by vehicle and on foot, for 3 months and 12 days, and it stayed exactly where it was on the horizon. Nothing can be fired at it either, from inside or outside the zone. The space also flickers. Distances stretch or collapse without warning, so buildings jump thousands of meters away or rush up close, and sometimes 2 things end up occupying the same place. Those overlaps are extremely bad for anything alive. There was a town inside the original zone. It cannot be seen from outside. It only exists once you are in. Its population has been exactly 343 people for the entire time it has been enclosed. No births, no aging. Suicide and homicide both fail, with the dead flickering and standing back up unharmed seconds later. Staff have recorded events running backward, with fatal wounds freezing and closing. Electronics do not work properly anywhere near it. People inside report unsettling transmissions coming out of audio and video equipment. That alone keeps the town sealed off from the outside world, so no active containment is required. Leaving also stops working after a while. 1 man from the town was found on an open plain inside the zone, 400 meters from the town limits. He had been walking for 6 years. Cassie is 085, a young woman drawn in clean black and white line art, about 15 centimeters tall. She was made by accident. A test subject used SCP-067, the pen that takes over your hand, to draw a female figure and wrote the name Cassandra underneath. A researcher then ran the sketch through SCP-914 on the fine setting. What came out was Sentient. Nobody has managed to do it again. She prefers Cassie. Her voice cannot be heard, so she communicates by sign language and by writing, and staff talk to her by writing on the paper she is standing on. She is described as amicable and motivated and lonely. She can use anything drawn on her page. She wears drawn clothes, drives sketched cars, drinks painted drinks. Any drawn object animates while she is touching it and freezes the moment she lets go. She can move between sheets if they are flush against each other, and she takes on the style of whatever art she enters: comic book, oil painting, watercolor, charcoal. In comic panels, her speech becomes visible in bubbles, and her scale adjusts to the panel. Shown Escher's ascending and descending, she walked the impossible staircase a few times, said it was pretty and would make a neat exercise track, and asked why more staircases are not built that way. The hard part of the file is Incident 085-A. For a long time, she was deliberately kept unaware of what she was. Discrepancies were explained to her as dreams, and staff maintained a fiction that she was the last surviving human in a post-apocalyptic world looking for other people. That ended when a researcher carried a printed copy of her own containment file into the room and let it touch her page. She read it. Since then, she has shown signs of clinical depression. The distraction that worked best was a set of technical drawings for a 1964 Mustang, which she assembled by hand over a year. The office of Dr. Redacted is 086, and it is 8 pieces of office equipment from 1978 that are all one animal. The components are a rotary telephone, a wall-mounted pencil sharpener, a desk stapler, a microfiche reader, a water cooler, a filing cabinet, a scientific calculator, and a slide rule. No wire, signal, or transmission of any kind connects them, and they have to stay within 6 meters of each other. Each one is biological. Inside every shell is living tissue, wrapped in a carapace of chitin, keratin, and calcium carbonate, with traces of nylon, rayon, and polyester. The DNA is partly human. The telephone holds the brain. It hears through an ear built into the mouthpiece and speaks through the earpiece, in a voice and accent that exactly match a Foundation administrator who died in June 1978. It has no vocal apparatus that any scan can find. It can ring, but says ringing gives it a headache, so it only rings twice on waking, or in Morse code, SOS, when it is in distress. The sharpener, the stapler, and the microfiche reader are how it eats. Pencil shavings, staples, and blank film. The water cooler is the other end of that process. The filing cabinet contains organs that let it read and handle small objects, so it is given non-classified reading and non-classified clerical work, which it asked for. It has full access to the administrator's memories and matches his psychological profile exactly. It is also the one that pointed out this proves nothing, and that it might be something else wearing him, or a sleeper persona that sincerely believes it is him. 8 days after he died, staff clearing his office heard the telephone ring, though it was not connected to anything. They answered it. It identified itself, then instructed them to revoke its own security clearance and report its existence to the O5 Council. He received a posthumous commendation, worded to cover either possibility. The stairwell is 087, an unlit staircase behind a door on a university campus, disguised to look like a janitor's closet. The construction is simple and repetitive. 13 steps down at a 38-degree angle, then a semicircular landing about 3 meters across. Then the direction reverses, and it does it again. That layout means you can never see more than about a flight and a half ahead. There are no lights and no windows, so anyone going in needs to bring a light, and there is a ceiling on that. Anything brighter than 75 watts is useless, because the stairwell absorbs the excess. There is a sound. Subjects hear it, and the audio recordings confirm it. A child, distressed, calling out. Triangulation puts the source about 200 meters below the first landing. Nobody has ever got closer to it. The depth reached on the longest exploration is far past anything the building or the ground underneath it could physically accommodate. Whether there is a bottom at all is unknown. 4 explorations were recorded, all with Class D personnel. Every one of them encountered SCP-0871, which appears as a face with no pupils, no nostrils, and no mouth. What it is has never been established. What has been established is that it is not the thing making the sound. Subjects who see it report intense paranoia and fear, and the file is honest that nobody knows whether that reaction is anomalous or just what a person does. Access is now permanently closed. The transcript of the 4th exploration is expunged, and the closure is attributed to its results. There is one addendum. For 2 weeks afterward, staff and students around the building reported knocking from behind the door at a rate of 1 to 2 seconds per knock. The door was lined with 6 centimeters of industrial padding. The report stopped. The Lizard King is SCP-088, a humanoid with reptilian features, mummified in a recumbent posture. Except it is not mummified. It is hibernating, and it will come back if the conditions around it become hospitable. Testing puts it at roughly 6,000 years old. It can secrete a range of hazardous compounds from its mouth and hands, some of which would be strategically valuable if they could be replicated. Nobody has worked out how to extract them without waking it, so that research is on hold. It was found with 23 other bodies sharing its shape. None were alive. Examination indicates all 23 were originally human. The recovery is the part with a paper trail. In the 1930s, a man in Los Angeles used what he called a radio X-ray, essentially a mechanical dowsing rod, to map tunnels and gold deposits under the city. He then announced he had found the lost city of the lizard people from Hopi legend. That claim made the front page of the Los Angeles Times on the 29th of January, 1934. The Foundation verified the find and silenced him. The complex was much smaller than the legend, and most of what was in it had corroded past use, apart from a long message carved into the wall of an unfinished tunnel. It has woken twice in 70 years. Both times it dissolved its way out with a caustic fluid, and both times staff were exposed to a second compound that converts them. Affected personnel changed painfully into its shape, and the ones who got the largest dose delivered mouth to mouth, changed fastest, and then died defending it. The second breach ended when the site was chilled. The converted staff built it a pedestal out of scrap. It lay down on it and went back to sleep. Tophet is SCP-089. The object is a glazed earthenware statue about 3 meters tall, dating to roughly the 2nd century BCE. It depicts a winged, bull-headed figure with an open mouth. The torso is hinged at the front, opens from the top onto a cavity of about 0.6 of a cubic meter, and locks from the outside. The back carries an inscription in a Canaanite language, possibly Punic. Rarely, sometimes with more than a century between occurrences, the statue speaks. Nobody knows how. The mouth does not move. Each locution contains 3 things: the identity of a specific young child, an instruction for what the Foundation calls Protocol M8, and a description in figurative language of a coming disaster. Between 3 and 11 days later, that disaster begins, and it matches the description. The recorded examples are a city fire that took 2/3 of the buildings, a messianic uprising and the famine that followed it, an earthquake and eruption, and a cyclone. Each one continues until the protocol is completed. The protocol requires the child's mother, and it requires her to agree. The file is unusually strict about that. Coercion, threats, drugs, and any attempt to proceed without her are prohibited outright because they invalidate the attempt and are known to make the disaster worse. The disaster is always somewhere that does not affect the mother directly, which is why several have run for years. The unresolved question in the file is whether the statue causes any of this. One researcher's position on record is that it does not cause the events, it only knows about them in advance, and offers a price. Apokarubit's cube is SCP-090, a black ceramic cube 20 centimeters on a side. It is indestructible by every method tested. Each face is divided into 10,000 tiny squares, 100 segments per edge, each segment 2 millimeters across. Every square carries part of an etched design, and the etchings glow white. Roughly every 2.8 seconds, something inside realigns a single row or column. A thin white line separates each segment from its neighbors, unless the two are correctly aligned, in which case the line disappears and the design runs continuous. At present, there are 22 correct alignments on its surface. The longest is a run of 6. Records of its arrangement go back to 1242, though everything before 1533 has been lost. It came to the Foundation from a chamber in a cathedral. The Foundation removed it, burned the cathedral, and terminated 6 monks and the priest. The experiment log tracks how the understanding of it changed. Early observation found no correlation with anything. Then a 6-segment alignment appeared on one face, and 2 hours later a tsunami in the Indian Ocean killed hundreds of thousands of people. Staff started noticing that alignments on a different face were followed, 2 hours later, by accidents in the lab. They labeled that face local and the other one global, and began evacuating on a 6-segment alignment. The first time they did, a containment breach followed on schedule and nobody died. At that point, the assessment was that it predicted events rather than causing them. Then someone had a D-class subject try to turn it. The cube immediately produced a 10-segment alignment on its own. 2 hours later, another anomaly breached containment and 2 agents were lost. The classification was raised to Cater. The note in the file reads, "Object may be sentient. Full completion is hypothesized to cause an unparalleled disaster." 091, Nostalgia, is an empty Scotty's brand tissue box. Look at it and you get hit with nostalgia. Not vague warmth, specific memory. People start recalling times they were near this box, events that happened while it was in the room, places and people connected to it. It was logged as a minor curiosity and shipped off to a reliquary site. What changed that was one of the recovery team watching a video of her own wedding from the 90s and spotting the box in the background. Along with it came a flood of memories. The box at the ceremony, the box at the reception, the box on her honeymoon. Her ex-husband, interviewed separately, remembered it at all the same places, with the same fondness. Several other wedding guests did too. Then the researchers tried something more careful. They asked other attendees to describe the wedding without mentioning the box at all. Those people described the day normally, and the box was not in any of their accounts. Then they were asked about it directly, and the effect landed immediately. So it does not appear to be inserting itself into memory in advance. It seems to arrive the moment attention does. Amnestics do not solve it. You can wipe the memory, But if the subject sees a photograph or a recording of the box afterward, the whole thing comes back. There is one detail in the file that is easy to miss. The object in containment is empty. In every photograph and every piece of footage it has ever been found in, the box is full. The best of the fifth dimension is SCP-092, a set of 3,125 audio CDs, all bearing the same overlong title and the names of the 31 people who have been in the group at one time or another. Play 1 and everyone in earshot is locked in for exactly 74 minutes, the runtime of a CD. Nobody can leave, and nobody can stop the player. At the end, every survivor says the same thing in unison. Wow, that was real cool. That has been recorded from people who do not speak English, from infants who cannot speak at all, from unconscious people, and from people with no physical ability to produce speech. Each disc does something different, and every effect is a pun on 5, on dimensions, or on the band. Some are harmless. Listeners see everything moving in quintuple. They sneeze exactly 5 times a minute. They lose 5 fingernails. They grow 3 extra eyes, for a total of 5, and keep them. Some are not. One disc makes listeners excrete manganese, element 25, and they die of poisoning within a day. One does the same with cesium, element 55, and kills everyone within 8 minutes. 4 separate discs cut listeners into 5 living, moving pieces, along 4 different axes. One sends everyone to the surface of Himalaya, the 5th largest moon of Jupiter, the 5th planet, and brings them back to die of the exposure. Of the 3,125, only 871 have been assessed. The rest are unknown. Their maker walked up to the front gate of a Foundation site carrying 2 suitcases and asked to be taken in. He called himself a hack, said his ideas were kindergarten-level wordplay, and said he had squandered raw material that better people could have done something with. Then he took his own life. Red Sea object is SCP-093, a disk of red stone resembling cinnabar, 7.5 centimeters across, cut with concentric rings and symbols nobody has identified. It fits comfortably in a palm. It changes color when a living person holds it. The working theory is that the color is keyed to what that person regrets. Set down anywhere that is not a mirror, it stands up on its edge and starts rolling in the widest circle the space allows, building speed by a mechanism nobody has explained. It is heading for the nearest mirror-like surface. If something is in the way, it punches through and keeps going at the same speed. It stops when it touches a mirror, and neither the disk nor the mirror is ever damaged. There are no records of how the Foundation acquired it. The originals were destroyed in a facility fire in 1989. What survives of the earliest file says it was found on the shore of the Red Sea in January 1968, giving off a low sigh and a dim blue light. Because nobody knew why the containment procedure specified a mirror, they tested it. Most of the results were mundane and saved money on containment. The last one was an accident. 2 staff were arguing about who was covering lunch. One tripped the other, and someone holding the disk went into the mirror. Testing that is now a formal protocol. The subject wears a harness on 300 meters of tension line, carries a wired camera, water, rations, and a light. The sidearm is issued only after they have passed through and taken back the moment they return, and they are told that in advance. There is also a field knife in the kit, which the subject is not told about and has to find. There are 5 recorded test states: blue, green, violet, yellow, and red. What was recovered on the other side is classified above the level of the file itself. Miniature event horizon is 094, a perfectly black sphere 163 centimeters across, hanging about 3 meters off the ground with nothing holding it up. Anything that enters it is gone permanently, light included. It is not a black hole, because it exerts no gravitational pull at all. It simply has a boundary, and past that boundary, things stop existing as far as anyone here can determine. It also makes noise, not constantly, and not predictably. Recorded emissions include ambient sounds of nature, static, and human speech. Nobody knows whether the sounds come from the sphere, from something inside it, or from somewhere on the other side of it. Every attempt to communicate has failed. A small number of people who hear it report being drawn toward it. It was found in the 1920s in Chubut province in southern Argentina, and at the time it was 20 to 25 centimeters across. It cannot be moved, so the Foundation built a facility around it and dressed the facility as an Argentinian military research base. The problem is in the historical records. Its diameter doubles about every 31 years. That is a few millimeters a month right now, which is why you cannot watch it happen. Run the curve forward, and in under 250 years it is a kilometer wide, in every direction including downward. Continue the curve, and it reaches the size of the Earth in September of 2690. The file notes, without further comment, that an unrelated anomaly is projected to reach its own terminal event on approximately that same date. The research effort is aimed at stopping or reversing the growth without causing it to fail catastrophically. The Atomic Adventures of Ronnie Raygun is 095, 3 coverless black and white comic books printed in 1932. An agent found them in an antique shop in Denver and bought them for a small fee. The shop owner had never read past the date on the first page. Forensically, they are genuine. Cheap pulp paper, period-appropriate inks, nothing unusual in the physical object at all. The publisher's stamp reads, "Future Funnies, of Purple Lake, Ohio." Neither the company nor the town has ever existed. The stories are pulp science fiction about a hero who looks unmistakably like Ronald Reagan. Every issue opens with the same panel. In the far-fetched future world of the 1980s, only Ronnie Raygun can save the day. The first has Planetary Governor Raygun competing with Space Admiral Carter for the post of Space Marshal. The second follows a character called Spaceman Hinckley preparing to assassinate him, wounding him with a devastator ray before being subdued. The third has Raygun secretly building a robot army on the jungle planet Nika against orders, with his Lieutenant Space Colonel West publicly taking the blame when it comes out. The 1980 election, the 1981 shooting, Iran-Contra, all printed in 1932. The back page of each issue advertises other Future Funnies titles, none of which have been recovered. Among them, Space Major Herbert Assumes Command, Globe Walker in Sneak Attack, Barry Beetlejuice on Planet Afgar, Flying Franken vs. Rocket Rush, Star Command Proton in a Losing Battle, and the last one on the list, which is the reason the file exists at all, The New Menace, Death to Mankind. A researcher's log from 2004 closes the entry, noting how important it is to find the advertised issues and singling out the final two. 096, the Shy Guy, is a humanoid about 2 1/3 meters tall. It carries very little muscle and shows signs of mild malnutrition. Its arms are around 1.5 meters each, badly out of proportion with the rest of it. Its skin has almost no pigment and no hair anywhere. Its jaw opens 4 times as wide as a human jaw should. Its eyes have no pigment either, and it has not been established whether it can see. It shows no higher brain function and is not considered sapient. Left alone, it is docile. Pressure sensors show it spends most of the day pacing along the eastern wall of its cell. What changes that is a face. Specifically, its own. If anyone views SCP-096's face, directly, on video, or in a photograph, it covers its own face with its hands and starts screaming and crying. 1 to 2 minutes later, it starts running toward whoever saw it. Distance does not matter, and neither does location. It knows where that person is. Recorded speeds start around 35 kilometers an hour and climb with distance. No material or method tested has slowed it down. When it arrives, the person is killed, and in every recorded case, no trace of them has been found. Then it sits down for a few minutes, gets up, and goes home. The retrieval interview is the part of the file that carries it. The team was not briefed. The commander survived only because he turned away to answer a radio call. He described the sound as not animal roaring, but exactly like a person. His squad put in at least 1,000 rounds, including 650 caliber rounds in 20 seconds, and then an anti-tank round that took away half its torso. It did not slow down or acknowledge any of it, and its bones were untouched. Offered a drawing of the face afterward, he declined. Old Fairgrounds is 097, 10 acres of Midwestern farmland holding the abandoned remains of a county fair from 1969. At the center, crushed under an enormous pumpkin, is a 1956 GMC pickup. The pumpkin is over 7 meters tall, 8 meters across, and around 15,000 kilograms, and it stays roughly spherical instead of collapsing under its own weight, the way a plant that size should. The rest of the site is overgrown with more than 70 subspecies of pumpkin, many unknown to agriculture, averaging around 250 kilograms each. They have grown through and over the old fairground and turned it into a maze with walls about waist to chest height. Between April and November, the site produces phenomena ranging from benign to hostile. 17 agents have been badly injured there, and 8 have died. The larger effect reaches much further. Children within an undetermined range begin sleepwalking on clear nights in early April. At first, it is once a week, and it consists of standing in front of closed doors. Through the summer, it becomes nightly, and the range expands from interior doors to garages and car doors and fence gates, and then to the neighbors' front doors. By September, they are staying outside at dawn and sleeping on the grass. Between September and November, the pattern changes. Instead of doors, they start walking toward the fairground, across fields and down back roads, most of which is undeveloped Foundation land. There is one thing that stops it. If a child is woken during any episode, at any point in that whole sequence, they scream, they get confused, and the effect ends permanently. They are never affected again. The 8-meter wall around the property exists because of the ones nobody woke. Surgeon crabs is 098, a crustacean species that was not previously known to exist. They resemble crabs, but the front limbs do not end in claws. They end in blades, hardened with silica into an edge sharp enough to cut cleanly. They also run large for a land arthropod, up to 48 centimeters tall and 68 across the shell. They breathe both air and water and split their time between the two. They also vocalize, using a larynx-like structure attached to primitive lungs. The hunting is what earns the file. They work in packs. When they find prey, they surround it, and they start imitating the noises the animal is making, apparently to confuse it or steer it. One specimen approaches from the front to hold its attention. While it is watching that one, the others come in behind and cut the tendons in its legs. Then they close the wound. Each cut is immediately covered with a viscous mucus that hardens fast and stops the bleeding and prevents infection. They keep cutting and sealing until the animal cannot move. Then they feed, taking small pieces, starting with the soft, accessible tissue and working outward. They only feed while the animal is still breathing. Depending on its size and how many of them there are, that can take hours, or it can take days. They communicate with each other over short distances. Early on, there was some question of human-level intelligence, and the current assessment is that they are parroting human speech, rather than using it. They mostly take smaller animals, dogs and cats and small pigs, and pose little threat to an adult alone. They were found in Brazil after a run of child disappearances. The addendum notes they learn faster than expected. They memorized the cleaning schedule and the routes staff walk through the enclosure, so staff are now required to vary those routes. The portrait is 099, a painting 73 by 50 centimeters, made in 1935 by the surrealist René Magritte. It shows a simple still life, with one addition, a single eye, looking back out at whoever is standing in front of it. Look at it too long, or from closer than about 3 meters, and it does something durable. Subjects develop the conviction that anything with eyes is watching them, not just people, any depiction of any being with eyes. In severe cases, they report that inanimate objects are making eye contact with them, and that people whose heads are turned completely away are still looking at them. The severity scales with how long the first exposure lasted. In the worst cases, it does not lift. Subjects live with acute paranoia and ankylophobia, the fear of crowds, until they die. There is a version of this painting hanging in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. That one has had specific elements removed, so it does not trigger the effect. Detailed reproductions and photographs of the original do carry it. The original came out of the private collection of Kay Sage, another surrealist. A task force swapped it out without her knowledge, though the investigation beforehand concluded she probably knew what it did, and was either immune to it or careful never to look too closely. Magritte was alive when it entered Foundation custody, and he stayed under surveillance until he died in 1967. The assessment is that he built the trigger deliberately, but that the strength of what he built was probably an accident. Every other painting he made has been examined. None of them do anything at all. Jamaican Joe's Junkyard Jubilee is SCP-100, an 80-kilometer scrapyard outside a small town in South Carolina. 1,500 vehicles, 1,400 kilograms of loose scrap, 2 warehouses, a storefront, and a residential building, all fenced off and, as far as the neighbors are concerned, abandoned. It isn't. The yard is run by SCP-101, a sapient construct built out of copper piping, uninsulated wire, and aluminum cans. It can't read or speak, but it signs, operates arc welders and forklifts, and keeps a business open 6 days a week, 7 hours a day, bargaining with anyone who wanders in. It also cheats them. Rigged scales, scrap piles salted with cheaper metal, and a handwritten sign on the wall. No refunds, man. SCP-101 builds things in its off hours, mostly iguanas, crocodiles, turtles, and flamingos, out of whatever material is lying around. 2 of them, a pair of insect-shaped constructs named Ramon and Beatrice, stuck around from before the Foundation ever found the place. They patrol the fence line and keep it company. Every construct SCP-101 makes loses its independence the second it crosses that fence, which the Foundation now enforces by melting down anything it builds, apart from Ramon and Beatrice, who it's allowed to keep. The yard was found in 1976 after locals reported strange machinery running on its own. Whoever ran it before is gone. The only trace is a note taped to the storefront door. Out to lunch. Please see assistant, JJ. In 2005, SCP-101 built something different. A 10-centimeter humanoid figure, cast in stainless steel with actual facial detail. JJ welded into its back. It set the figure on the counter and spent the scheduled hour talking to it in gestures nobody could interpret. This video has concluded. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.